This is 1 p.m. Monday, April 21st, 2025. So first item is citizen input. Is there anybody with anything that's not on the agenda? Citizen input for items not on the agenda. Is there anybody with raised hand online? So at this time, item number 1, Facilities Department Capital Improvement Program update. Big picture at this time, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oops, wrong one. This one.
Sorry, a couple years ago.
How's that? Better?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Almost ready. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Lee Randall, Facilities Director.
Eric Nielsen, Capital Improvement Manager.
So we thought this was a good opportunity going into budget season, and since we hadn't been in front of you for a while talking about all that the capital improvement program encompasses and that we're working on, we wanted to meet with you and just kind of provide a high-level overview. So we'll talk about the services that the program provides, planning, completed projects, current projects, and future planning.
So services provided can pretty much be broken down into 3 categories, beginning with project development. So that's kind of, and we assist departments with developing their projects all the way from kind of the initial idea all the way up to the planning and budgeting process, up to issuing RFPs. A good example of that's the Gray Courthouse improvements. We completed the kind of project development portion and just we're in the middle of the proposal process. That leads into project execution, which is essentially everything from issuing RFPs, managing the design process, bidding the project, managing construction. Courthouse expansion is an example of where we're at in that project. And then that slides into the project closeout, so getting the warranties, punch walks, as-builts, and everything we need to close out the project.
So the next area that we're involved in is planning. You'll recall in 2017 with the plans for the stabilization center, that initiated a public safety campus plan. That plan was updated in 2024. And now we're about to embark on a downtown campus plan. We expect to issue a request for proposals for a team to be involved in that. Sometime in probably the next month. We have some other work that we're wrapping up, and then we'll move on to a downtown campus plan.
If I could just briefly mention, Commissioner Devon and I heard we talked for just 2 minutes about that with Mayor Keebler and then City Manager Eric King. I think it was last week. That you'll have a presentation on that at the joint meeting a week from today, and then how we can coordinate, collaborate with the City of Bend on that, given that they have the building and land use jurisdiction and Forest County owned property. So yeah, great.
Yeah, they were very interested in the topic, just knowing that it'll be in the middle of town.
Great.
All right, next we'll talk about some recently completed projects. So beginning with the parole and probation expansion, it was a two-story, 8,300 square foot addition to the existing building. Provided new lobby space, some meeting rooms on the first floor, and then new or additional office spaces on the second floor. And it also included a remodel in the existing building for a wellness room and for Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, and then a secure parking area for Sheriff's Office as well. And that was completed in April of 23. North County remodels, so there's two buildings, 244 and 236 Kingwood. 244 was for behavioral health services with Mosaic Community Health embedded as a tenant. That was completed in November of 23. And then 236 Kingwood, which houses a variety of departments, health services, 911 service district, and now there's IT and risk occupy that too.
We'll touch on it.
Oh, yeah, so for North County and for parole and probation, there's some alternative contracting method evaluations that we included in the agenda packet. Those.
So yeah, I saw this as part of the packet, so this is really just showing the progression of how we got from step A to step B, and then selected the CMGC at that point for the project.
And so that evaluation report closes out the approval of the finding of facts that kind of kicks off that alternative contracting method. And then the report is the bookend for that.
Several minor projects we'll mention. We just completed the CDD exterior wall repairs, and that was to fix a structural issue with the building. In order to do those repairs, we also had to replace all the exterior windows. The Wyatt building remodel, that was for health services and a leased building near Courtney. And then finally the juvenile remodel to remodel the day room into a meeting space for juvenile staff.
That CDD project, I was in there as they were kind of working their way across the walls or whatever, so it's nice to have it done. I guess I don't know the status of the cubicles and the offices. Are they kind of re-rotated back inside, or?
Yeah, we're all complete. It was CDD helped a lot moving staff. We had to phase it.
Yeah.
We did the west side of the building, first and second floor first, and then we shifted over to the east side, first and second floor. So the staff kind of jumped back and forth.
Big project,
Yeah.
just trying to get your daily work done too.
Yeah, Tracy Griffin helped out a lot with that.
One of the ancillary benefits of that will be improved energy efficiency. So the new windows that went in are much better performing windows, and we're looking forward to do some energy consumption comparisons over a period of time to kind of measure how big that improvement will be. But we're already getting feedback from the occupants that the building's more comfortable. There's less drafts, there's less either heat reflected through the windows or cold. So that's one of the extra benefits of doing that project.
So were all the windows replaced or just on the east and west side?
All of the windows except for the glass at the entry door.
We'll transition to some current projects. So I wanted to provide a little background on the downtown campus parking project, which is currently out to bid for general contractors. As we were looking at the courthouse expansion several years ago, we had some concerns about parking capacity, and we worked through a study and did real-time measurements of the usage of the parking lots and what kind of capacity we might need with the expansion of the courthouse. And what came out of that was that we have enough capacity, but where the parking is allocated and to whom and policy were areas that we could improve. And then adding parking adjacent to buildings. So one thing that's unique about our campus and some of our buildings here is that we have big areas of parking, but we don't necessarily have parking that's directly near a public entrance in a lot of cases. And so one recommendation that came out of the study was to improve that. The second recommendation was to improve access across the campus and safety for pedestrians, so along Lafayette, and then access through the north parking lot to Norton. And so those are some of the components of the project that came out of that study.
Yeah, as Lee mentioned, we're in the middle of bidding right now. We had a pre-bid meeting a couple weeks ago. Had, I think, probably 8 or 9 general contractors show up. And then we'll have a bid opening on May 15th. So bid opening May 15th, we'll award the contract, and then plan is to start construction after July 1st. We're having to kind of sequence some things with the city's only project. And we'll plan to complete that by Thanksgiving.
Another area that we're partnering with behavioral health and property management on is to identify, purchase, and remodel homes for residential adult foster care. And so this is the first home that's been purchased. We're working to select a team, a design team, to help build the improvements and to make them specific to this new operation. So this home is, in particular, is for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, with co-occurring mental health issues. And so there's some, I think, opportunities for unique design to support the folks that will be living in that home, and there's money budgeted to do that. So that's a project we'll be embarking on soon. And then there's the opportunity to purchase at least hopefully one more home, if not a third, depending on the budget of the first two. And so that's something that we'll be working with probably over the next year plus to complete that work.
And of course, courthouse expansion is ongoing. Continuing to pour concrete or working through the cores. The next milestone will be pouring the slab, the basement slab, the first week of May. And somewhere around August, we should have the roof deck poured. So by the end of the summer, we should have the majority of the structure complete. Plan completion is next August of 26. And we did include an updated budget in the packet too.
Next on the horizon is the Great Courthouse improvements. Those are budgeted currently for design development, and then they are part of our proposed budget for FY26 to finish permitting and design, and then move to construction. So some of the background, this particular project, the state courts administration currently occupies the second floor. This project will remodel that area for use by the DA's office after court administration moves into the new expansion. And then we've also identified some building improvements that make sense to do at the same time. So we've been looking across the county at our buildings in regard to seismic upgrades for many years. And we've identified some potential upgrades in the Great Courthouse that would provide for life safety in the event of a seismic event. And so we'll be working with the design team to identify particular improvements for seismic upgrades, and then a list of some other building upgrades that that fit well with a remodel project that we can lessen the disturbance to the building as a whole to do all that work in parallel.
So Lee, when was that building done?
The original construction was 1940.
1940s. So what kind of an earthquake can it survive in today's world? And what's your goal?
So our goal for all of our projects, our first goal is life safety. And so in the event of an event, the goal is to get people out safely. So we're looking at things like ceiling grid, columns, how they're put together, how the connection from one column to the next floor is. And then particular to this building, there may be exterior features of the building that are no longer needed. Example on some buildings of this age are flues for boilers, for coal-fired boilers. Those flues are no longer needed, and there's a lot of weight that's high up on the building. And so that's another area to address. And then protecting egress corridors. So as we look at the building in the event of an earthquake, how do we get people out safely? You look primarily at those egress corridors, making sure that whatever is built into the structure above those corridors will sustain an earthquake. In terms of knowing what this may have been designed for or how it would perform, it's somewhat challenging. We don't have the original structural drawings, and so Eric oversaw a very complete investigation. We took core samples of the poured in place concrete walls. We did some GPR analysis, or a X-ray, essentially X-ray or radar analysis of the walls to identify where the steel structure, the rebar supports are. You can kind of expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, we took cores out of the main structural elements, concrete cylinders, and then had them tested to understand the compressive strength of the concrete. And then we also scanned the exterior walls to figure out rebar spacing also the columns to figure out how the rebar is spaced in that. I think generally the structural engineers, there were no big red flags, but so they did recommend some seismic upgrades just to confine columns, just generally increase the performance of the building.
We're not trying to design to the same kind of earthquake safety standards that they are over in the Willamette Valley, for example.
We are, I believe, in a different seismic zone.
We are, yeah.
So the building code is all across the state is divided by seismic zone. We designed to the particular one that we're in. You would know a little.
Yeah, so each area has a different seismic zone, and then each building has a different importance factor. So it's a public building in the sense that there's staff in there, but it's an office building. It's not like, it wouldn't be designed to the same standards as like a school or something, but, what was I gonna say? So as far as, I guess, the upgrades themselves, we're not trying to bring it to current standards. We've just identified some areas that we can improve in the building. And the way we're gonna structure the design process is we have these recommendations from the structural engineer. We'll design them up to a certain level, get some cost estimates on that, and then see how it all fits in with the budget, and then kind of prioritize those upgrades based on the budget.
I guess what I was just trying to understand was whether we perceive the risk in the same way that they would over in the Cascadia subductions.
Yeah, less risky.
Which we don't. Okay.
Yeah.
So considering the building has been standing since 1940, there's kind of some, I guess, the perceived risk is less as well, but it's stood up to other events.
We do have some anticipated projects on the horizon as well, and we'll end with this, and then we'll be available for any questions.
Yeah, so the first two is the public safety campus plan and the downtown campus plans. Coming out of those planning projects, there's potentially some near-term projects that we could get started on. We're also working with solid waste to plan facilities at not landfill for material recycling, potentially compost facilities, and then also the new landfill. And then just as projects come up, we offer project management services to different departments for project initiation and helping them get started in the planning process.
That's
Well, it's gonna take a moment, kind of think of the big picture of what are the moving parts right now. When I see the public safety campus, I think of a couple projects out there. Everything costs millions, but also a big project. The tower over the big one out. But everyone's on project. I don't want to take a big picture.
When for the next public safety campus projects, when do you think you'll be bringing them to the board for review and discussion?
We've just started discussions with the sheriff's office, kind of restarted the work that we had been planning. So I would expect it several months out at a minimum to kind of revisit the priorities that came out of the public safety campus plan, and then understand those what currently are identified as the highest needs.
Great, thank you so much.
All right.
Next item is treasurer report. Treasury. Financial update.
Here we go. Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Bill Coon, Shitts County Treasurer. Thanks for allowing me to present the March Treasurer's Report. As I usually do, I'll take a few minutes to provide a high-level overview of economic conditions. There's certainly been a lot going on over the last several weeks. Headlines have been dominated by the ongoing tariff discussions, which are being viewed as resetting balances of global trade. These discussions have roiled financial markets with significant swings in trading indices, including a rare drop in both the stock market trading averages and a simultaneous decline in bond yields, which occurred last week. There's been considerable debate on why Treasury yields dropped when bonds are typically viewed as a safe haven trade in times of economic uncertainty. The common perception is that this was due to hedge funds deleveraging to offset margin trades, but there was also debate that with the recent volatility in U.S. financial markets, global economies are still they still viewing investment in U.S. government debt as a risk-free trade? And there's been a lot of debate over the last several weeks with regards to that. On a related note, I noted this morning that the U.S. dollar fell to a 3-year low over global concerns with U.S. fiscal policy, as the greenback is widely viewed as the global reserve currency. Also, there was news. Go ahead.
Just so, yeah, just to have a step back here. So you were saying bond rates are going down.
Bond rates dropped at the same time the stock market declined, which is very unusual.
Yeah, that's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, bond yields.
Is
That typically they
and that's been
operate.
the tool that's been here, the main tool we have here.
Yeah,
But now
exactly.
they're both kind of working their way.
Yeah, and that was very unusual, and haven't seen that happen for quite some time. And there's been a lot of kind of investigation into why that happened. I don't think anybody has really got a clear-cut answer yet on that, but
The inverted yield curve is the thing that's, you hear about, that was the
this,
predictor out there that was something to look at.
yeah,
This is
this
different.
was really what happened here was a long-term 10-year bond rate that declined dramatically at the same time the stock market was declining as well. And anyway, that's I think more to come in that regard. It's certainly something to watch. Also noted this morning that there are indications that China is now indicating some willingness to negotiate with the U.S. on their escalating and what I would describe as layered tariff war. Currently, if you've lost track, the U.S. is currently setting a combined 145% tariff on Chinese imports, and China settled on 125% tariff on U.S. imports. Independent of the tariff impasse between the two largest global economies, U.S. representatives are moving forward with separate negotiations with many other countries, including trading blocs such as the European Union, and also I heard this morning with Japan. So a lot of discussion going on back and forth, but I think the biggest issue is what impact will these tariffs have on future economic growth, and I think that still remains to be seen. I think from all indications, there's an expectation that this will have an impact on growth, especially in the latter quarter or second quarter of this year and into the second, third quarters of the remainder of the year. The Fed obviously is in a very difficult situation right now, where they're trying to, basically manage rate policy with a lot of uncertainty with regards to economic growth and activity. Right now, there's two schools of thought. The Fed is still, there's been a lot of communication from Fed officials anticipating only a 50 basis point drop between now and the end of the year, but the market, financial markets are pricing in up to 4 reductions before year end. So that'll remain to be seen as well. I indicated this earlier, but the bellwether 10-year U.S. Treasury yield was a low of 4% on April 4th, but has since gained 38 basis points and is currently trading at 4.38% as of this morning. And this is really important because most long-term mortgage rates are priced based on this index. So that also has an impact on economic activity and certainly the housing market. Related to the economy, U.S. jobs growth reported 228,000 jobs in March, which surpassed expectations of 140,000 new jobs. Conversely, the unemployment rate rose to 4.2%, up from 4.1% in February. The strong jobs report again suggests a resilient economy, at least in Q1. leading the Fed to monitor tariff activity on kind of gauging what impact that might have on economic growth going into the future. Areas of strength in the job report were in healthcare. Well, not surprisingly, the largest area of job loss was in federal unemployment, which we've seen over the last month to 45 days.
Yeah, we haven't even seen most of it.
We haven't seen the impact, and absolutely the March jobs report. I think we're going to start to see the full impact there in April and beyond when we see those jobs numbers. Conversely, the March CPI surprised to the downside as well, decreasing from 2.8% in February to 2.4% in March on an annualized basis, with most significant decline occurring in energy prices, which experienced a 6.3% decline month over month. This did little to quell concerns about future upside price risks, with growing concerns regarding the effects of tariffs and also immigration policy as well, adding additional potential inflationary pressures. So as you can tell, there's a lot of conflicting information out there right now that I think it's going to probably take another 7 months before we really see the full impact from. And as I've indicated, as a result, the Fed has an exceedingly difficult path forward, attempting to a delicate balance of supporting the U.S. labor market while trying to reduce price pressures back to that 2% level, which they're trying to get to. It is still expected that the Fed will choose to leave rates unchanged during its next meeting, which is on May 6th and 7th. And as I've indicated, there's still some question out there as to how many rate cuts we might be looking at between now and the end of the year. Another economic barometer that I've been paying attention to over the last several months is consumer confidence, which dropped 9.6% in March, which takes it to the lowest level in 12 years. And this is reflecting, I think, consumer angst over current business conditions and also, potential negative impacts from the tariff activity. From a manufacturing perspective, the producer price index declined 2.7% year over year, which was slightly lower than analyst expectations, but marked continued inflationary demand for goods. As I indicated earlier, most recent average 30-year mortgage rate has risen to 6.89%, which is driven largely by the increase in the 10-year bond rate. Rates are up nearly 40 basis points from February of 2025. So in about 30 days, we've seen a significant increase in 30-year mortgage rates. Current economic environment has had an impact on housing starts, which were reported at only 940,000 for the month of March, which was 14.2% below the February 2025 level. High construction costs, the current interest rate environment, and challenging housing affordability conditions are causing builders to approach this market with caution. The National Association of Home Builders survey, which was released last week, revealed that recent tariff activity is expected to add almost $11,000 to the cost of a typical residential home. And they didn't really describe what that typical residential home would cost, but again, that gives you a kind of an idea on what that impact might be. At a regional level, typically provide information on several markets within Deschutes County. The Bend single-family market showed a median sales price of $748,000 in March, which was up from $700,000 in February. So we're still seeing elevated pricing in the Bend market. With 122 sales for the month of March, 34 of these sales were above $1 million, and 38 of these were cash sales. So we're still seeing a lot of current sales activity being driven by cash buyers, which aren't impacted by mortgage rates. There's now a 2.5-month supply of homes currently listed, and we're looking at 32 days listing for sold properties. So the properties that are selling aren't on the market for very long. And I will note that Bend area building permits declined to 31 in March, which was down from 53 in February. So we're seeing a little bit of slowness in application for building permits there as well. The Redmond statistics saw stable median prices of $523,000 in March, which compared favorably to $530,000 in February. Redmond area building permits were up to 25 in March, which was up from 15 for the prior month. And sales in the Redmond market have increased over the last several months. And I think that correlates directly with a high level of economic growth in the area. Job creation in that area is driving home sales. Looking at some other markets
So
within
how many
Deschutes
sales
County.
then were there in Redmond? If there
Excuse
were-
me.
How many sales, home sales, did you say that? You gave us the number of 520,000.
The information that I have available doesn't actually track the number of sales for Redmond.
Okay,
Yeah, they do track it in Redmond, or excuse me, in Bend, but I didn't have that information.
but they had
available.
more than single family home building permits applied for in March. Which
Yeah,
was
they
contrary
actually-
to what Ben was doing.
Yeah, they did tick up in the Redmond market
Okay,
and came down in Bend. Yeah. Looking at other markets within Deschutes County, the Sisters Market had a median sales price of $734,000, and that was on 7 sales. So again, these are smaller markets with limited number of sales. The Sun River Market had a median price of $880,000 on 12 sales. And La Pine, the median price ticked up to $420,000, and it was up from, I think it was $338 last month. So it had a little bit of an increase there. Any questions on any of the economic activity? So I'll move on to the March Treasurer's Report. The portfolio balance was $341 million at month end, which was a decrease of $23 million from February. And this decline was primarily due to, we had some tax turnover that took place during the month and also ongoing funding needs, including the courthouse project and current operating needs as well. Net investment earnings were $1,124,000 for the month, which was $40,000 higher than last month's earnings, but almost $206,000 higher than a year ago. We are starting to see the impact of reductions in short-term rates in both our short-term LGIP pool and also the FIB rates that they offer on our third tier. All portfolio category balances are well within policy guidelines. The LGIP rate is indicated, actually reduced to 4.6% for the month, which was down from 4.7% in the prior month. And the First Interstate Bank has reduced to 4.25% that they pay on that third tier. What I'm now showing on the report is a blended average rate under the yield percentage line item to account for the 2 different rates that we have in our investments. Overall portfolio yields did decline slightly from 3.99% in February to 3.96% in March. And this was obviously impacted by a reduction in the short-term rates we're starting to see. With recent investment activity, the portfolio now has a weighted term to maturity of 1.13 years, with a maximum maturity standing at 3.25 years right now. This time to maturity is somewhat skewed by courthouse funding that were invested to match the expected funding need with the construction project, but this is actually diminishing over time. Reflecting recent concerns regarding federal funding, we are keeping a slightly higher level of short-term liquidity, which is available to buffer any short-term disruptions we might see in payments. And the bulk of these funds are yielding the LGIP rate of 4.6%. So
you might not have been, I wasn't aware, but I did learn it at the investment meeting the other day, that First Interstate only matched the LGIP rate for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then they were, as he just mentioned, it went down to 4.25, so.
yeah, that was a previously agreed upon rate, and they told us they would do it for 6 months, but they did. And they've lowered the rate a couple times since then, but they've kept the rate at a reasonable market rate, I would say, and it does give us some flexibility to keep additional funds on deposit with First Interstate Bank, but we've also been strategic about keeping more in the FIP or the LGIP pool because of that higher yield.
Right.
So, yeah, you're very welcome. Any other questions?
The yield chart, you know, there was for the last couple of years, there's been a lot of opportunities for our yield rate to go up because everything else was higher. Now it seems like we're starting to flatten off. I mean, do you think that's about as high as we're gonna get?
Yeah, I think there's two things that have happened there. Over the last year and a half to 2 years, we've been able to invest at much higher rates following the yield curve. And I'll give you an example of most of the investing that I did in December, January, February. I was investing out 3 years at 4.25 to 4.3% yield for 3-year investments. We are also seeing a corresponding drop in older maturing bonds that have matured and been redeemed. And so we're seeing a lesser impact on our average yield by some of those investments that were made at a much lower rate, dropping out of our portfolio. So I think we've seen, kind of the twin effects of a much more attractive investment market, and also seeing some of those older investments kind of age out of the portfolio. Answer your question?
Well, I mean, that's an analysis of where we're at. I mean,
Yeah.
Looking forward, like I guess I was curious,
Yeah.
whether there was still more
Room
gain
to move.
more progress to be, and more improvement to be made.
And
Or whether
so
it-
much of that depends on the rate market
there's a whole
going
lot of
forward,
uncertainty.
Fed action. There's quite a few variables right now, and still a lot of uncertainty with regards to fiscal policy going forward.
I mean, guys,
So,
I was looking at this chart like, oh, well, there's that much, there's been
Yeah.
that much, that much improvement, potential improvement to be made over time, but for example, the treasury rate now is below us.
yeah, yeah.
So maybe
No, we've seen those margins narrow over time, and I think part of that was just the improved performance of Deschutes County's portfolio, because we've been able to, like I said, age out
Take
some of those
advantage of
older
all-
investments and reinvest it at much more attractive rates. And I think the other variable is just what's going to happen with our short-term liquidity rates as well. What happens with the LGIP pool rate, and then also corresponding what action First Interstate Bank might take on that investment pool as well.
I mean, in this chart, the LGIP is steadily declining for
It has been, reached a high of, 5.25%, I believe, Matt, last year, middle part of last year, and it's been declining since then.
So Bill, what about that, in our bylaws for the investment group, and it's like 2.0 was the weighted average time. Did you look into that anymore in the afternoon after our meeting that day? Remember there was a little memo, or one of the,
Yeah, it actually,
I mean, it said a minimum one place and a maximum the other, and I just wondered.
No, I know, and
It was-
we're gonna go back and I think for the benefit of commissioners, we're gonna go back and make a couple of minor modifications to our investment policy, because that was certainly contrary to.
Yes.
Yeah, it was actually, needs to be restated within our investment policy, but it was actually contradictory to a statement later in the policy that reflected the correct verbiage in terms of how we view maturity dates within the portfolio. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, it was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, we'll be taking corrective action on that. That's actually been out there for a number of years, and it needs to be corrected.
Yes.
So one of our sharp-eyed investment advisory committee members noted that, and we had a good discussion, and we'll be moving forward with a modification of that policy. So. Anything else?
Nope, thank you so much.
Yeah. More to come?
Street Finances. March 25 finance report.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Robert Tintel, Chief Financial Officer. Today in your packet, you have before you the March 2025 unaudited financial reports that we'll be going over. And basically, I'll just be highlighting some of the change from month to month. And if there are status quo financial statements, then I won't be going over a lot of detail on those. First, a quick update where we are in the budget process. So just providing a quick update, as you know now, I can say next month, it'll be our budget committee week, again, the week of the 12th through the 14th, 3 days. And so we're getting prepared for that. We've met with all of the departments, met with the budget officer, and we are now putting together the proposed budget. The budget team is diligently working on combining all of the funds, all of the department's narratives, all the graphs, all the information, and all the budget messages. And so it takes a while to put that all together, draft it, have it reviewed, go to print, all prior to the budget committee members. So we are looking forward to that process. And as you know, it's a lot of work behind the scenes, and they're diligently doing all that work. Just a quick update there. So you have in your packet, page 69, if you have the full packet, the report before you. The first highlight is the general fund, just a dashboard there that you can see. We are 75% through the year, which means 3/4 of the year. We just have 1 quarter left. So we're nearing the end of this fiscal year as well. Just a highlight of the general fund, we're at 97.4% of the revenues, and expenditures at this point are 54.6% of budget. And that's kind of skewed a little bit by some of the transfer numbers that we have in there, but we'll look at that. Our beginning fund balance is 15.5 million, or 106% of budget, compared to what we estimated would be the budgeted, which that's a good sign to be higher on your beginning fund balance in those areas. So I'll go to the next page on page 70. It's the FTE position report. The change in FTE from last month was the addition of 1.0 FTE. You may recall that was for the Building Safety Inspector 3 that was approved by the board for A-level plumbing inspections in the CDD department. So follow up from last month, I think it was last month. If you notice the sheriff's office, they have 39.5 unfilled positions. I think last month I highlighted, or I did highlight. It's the first time they were under 40 for quite a while. And the question came up, how many can they fill and still, because they are reliant on vacancy savings. Through the budget process, we did talk about that as well. It's probably about half of those positions. They would still be able to fill and still budget vacancy savings in order to balance their budget as well. So there is plenty of room for them to hire if, qualified candidates are out there. Total year-to-date percent unfilled for the county is 10.25%. Currently, for the year average, the month was only 9.88, but still all around that 10% mark. Again, fiscal year 24 and 23 was 10.55 and 10.43 averages over the year. So it's just hovering around that 10%. A lot of that is attrition, retirements, vacancies, and you just keep rehiring. So that seems to be where we're landing at this point.
The one that kind of popped out at me was 911, and they're up to 4 now because we are getting to be tourist seasons. So I hope Sarah's watching and she could say that, oh, Patty, we've got a couple people coming in. I know they've had some major retirement, but.
Yeah, and as you know, Sarah's always on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know she is, and I just was like, oh my gosh, summer's coming, so, okay. I hope we have some new people to go.
Yep. Next, page 71 in your packet is the total personnel and overtime report. Currently, no funds are over budget in their total personnel costs as of 3/31. You will see in the projections there are 4 X's there. Those are where projected to be over in their total personnel costs. And most of these are with some of the smaller funds where they don't have a lot of personnel. And that's because you may recall that health insurance costs are part of personnel costs, and we didn't adjust the budget for the additional 15% that we increased health insurance rates after the budget was approved. So that's why some of these smaller funds, they can't absorb the additional costs. So we'll be coming by the end of the year with a budget adjustment for those items to make sure they're not over budget by the end of the fiscal year. But through the year, we just try to, from all the funds in particular, we're not going to adjust the budget till we get to the end because we do hope most funds can absorb that additional cost that we did. And 5 funds have overtime costs over their budget amount. That's that last column with the 5 X's. The total is $25,000 for those, but out of a $200 million budget, total personnel cost budget, the 25,000, again, it's mostly in some of the smaller funds, not in particular where the bigger funds are. So, and then again, their total personnel costs to date are under budget as well. I'm going to go through a few pages and now go to page 76 in your packet, which is the general fund. So basically, the general fund is still on target on the resources, the top portion to where we were with last month. There was a slight change in total requirements, that middle section there. If we look at the last section of columns, projections, the projection is 28.5 million. Last month it was 28.8 million. So we did reduce our projections where we think we'll end up on expenditures by about $300,000. We're spending more, so that changes it down by $300,000. Total fund balance is, we're projecting at the end of the year $21.4 million, which is 6.7 million more than budget. Total, it's about 200,000 over last month's estimate. Last month we estimated about 6.6, so we increased to about 6.7 where we thought we'd end up. So, but it's right within, it's where we'd expect. So obviously, as I mentioned, we have one more quarter to go on the general fund, so we'll see where we land. And these ending projection numbers are important because as we compare the budget, we'll see the ending number for this year is obviously the beginning number for next year. And we already made an estimate for the beginning number for next year. And then once we have the actuals, then we adjust that number. We come later in the budget year to add more beginning working capital or reduce it. So we always try to be a little more conservative on the budget. Juvenile justice, there was no change from last month's estimates, so I'll go past that. I'll go to page 78, TRT Fund 160, 170. Again, the good news is we are still up on our room tax revenue, 1.1% from last year's actuals. But since we did lower our budget last year, we're still 3.4% over on the budget. The interesting thing to look at as far as how did we get to the 1.1%? We had some months we were over, from July through March now. Some months we were over, we had 3 months of negative growth in activity, but there were just 2 months that were really stood out was on our financial statements, it was January and February, but it reflects the December and January activity in the hotels. January was up, or December was up 11.2%, in February, which was January activity, 14.7. So those 2 months of really good activity in those winter weather months helped bring us in a really good light. So it's just interesting when you look at the month change from that as well.
Makes a big difference.
That's right. So the August, September, October, those were the 3 months of activity that were down. It was our financial September, October, November, but again, the actual activity, August, September, October, those were the 3 months we were down from last year. But overall, again, we're fortunate that we are above our projections, which is good at this point, and we're still projecting we'll be over our total revenue in the TRT fund by the end of the fiscal year. ARPA fund next, Fund 200 on page 79. Just want to highlight there, one of the items you'll see on the resources and the projection that changed is $4.6 million LACTIV funds. We are going to end up transferring that LACTIV funds from ARPA over to the capital projects funds for the courthouse. As we know that those funds have always been dedicated to the courthouse. We just haven't, we keep it in this fund until it was going to be used by the capital projects, and we are going to be transferring that. So later this year, well, only in a couple months. Cam, Budget and Financial Planning Manager, will be coming to the board. That'll be part of the budget adjustment, just the transferring it over there. And the ending number there, that was updated, total fund balance, 984,000. The variance there for the difference in the total projection. That represents the three projects really, but the Deschutes River Conservancy and the Mountain View Community Development projects, that represents the outstanding balance for those external projects that we are still, they're still working on, and so they can request reimbursement for those projects as well. Justice Courts, no change from last month. The only thing, again, I like to highlight on this one, you'll see the total resources of the budget or actuals are 500,000 for the budget, 379,000 actuals to date. But their expenditures for budget 819,000, actuals to date are 612,000. And what that means is that transfers column section in the middle or near the end, that's the subsidy that we do apply towards justice courts from TRT revenue to make that sustainable, since it's not a self-sufficient service at this time. Sheriff's Office Fund 255 is next on page 81. Haven't been any changes in their projections on resources. On their total requirements, their projections their ending projections on expenses went down by about 600,000, which helps them. So it's current projection variance 3.7 million. They're projecting 3.1 million. So their total projection will be going down. So that means their fund balance at the end is they're projecting 19.4 million at the end of the year, which is 3 million more than their budget. So they've been working on looking at their expenditures and updating those. And really their expenditures, the detective section, adult jail, and special services, training is where the difference they adjusted from last month in the rest. So they're continuing to refine that, and we'll see where we are at the end of the year. Next page, 82, high level fund, health services 274. And this is all their programs combined. They are projecting to be under revenue, and we'll get into the details by their sections in a minute, but of all funds combined, 3.4 million under their budget on revenues, and their total requirements, $8 million under, which is a savings there. So overall, their total fund balance at the end, they're projecting $2.6 million variance, better than their budget, because their ending projection is at 10.4, all funds combined at this point. Just an update on the OHP reserves related that aren't in these numbers, just extra. Current balance in the reserve is 29.3 million as of March 31st. Their projection at the end of the year is 35.6 million. And they'll talk during the budget process, their plan and uses for that reserve. And also, as you know, part of that reserve is assisting with operating costs in the lack of other revenue that may not be coming in.
So you called it OHP today?
Yeah, OHP reserves are Fund 270.
Okay, so you're not saying it's from the behavioral health fund then?
It is a behavioral health reserve. The
Okay.
official title of the fund is OHP reserves.
Okay.
So their admin fund is somewhat similar, so I won't go over that in detail, but on the next page, 84, the behavioral health fund specific in Fund 274. So if you look at their revenues, they are projecting the total revenues, they'll be at $50.4 million, which is less than their budgeted amount, and it's a decrease from their last month's projections as well. They decreased it by about $1 million from their projection last month, and that was really in their Medicaid and their state grant categories, and that's also because I'm assuming federal revenues also flow through some of those state grant categories. So they're monitoring that. And also in their total requirements section, they did reduce their projections on expenditures with the decrease in revenue. They also decreased their expenditure projections. So there is a savings of about $700,000 over the prior month. So the net change in their total fund balance is only a difference of about $300,000 by the time they adjust the revenue, just the expenditures. And so their ending fund balance ends at 3.8 million, or about 817 difference from budget, which last month that difference was 1.1, so it's slightly off by 300,000. On public health, they did adjust some of their numbers this month from last month, but the ending projection at 1.2 million off from their budget on their total fund balance, that's similar to what it was 2 months ago at 1.1. So even though it is fluctuating there, it's somewhat staying consistent on where their ending fund balance projections are looking at this point. A few more, 86. Page 86, Fund 295 for community development. Again, their projections are similar. They send out their stats on this. As you know, their current projection permits and application volumes continue to align with their 2015, 2016 year. So they're continuing to monitor that, and they always try to stay within that $1 million fund balance reserve there for that. Road is similar to last month as well, so is adult probation. So I'm going to go past those. Just want to highlight page 89, Road CIP Fund 465. Again, their projections are similar. I just want to this month point out the difference as we're entering into this fair weather season, construction season. In the middle section under requirements for the capital outlay line, you see their actuals are only at 3.4 million as of March 31st, but they project by the end of the year to spend 10.6 million. So that just is a couple of things that affects. One is, as Bill was just here talking about, our cash and cash flow and our cash expenditures. Obviously, during this time, road spends a lot more because it's the road construction season. But they do still plan to spend 5.4 million less than they had budgeted this year. But still a hefty amount there. We'll go to solid waste on page 91. The revenues continue to be about the same as last month, and their expenditures, they reduced their year-end projection. Last month it was a 16.5 million, their projection they proposed, and this month it's at 15.8. So that has a savings to them in their expenditures of 600,000, and so that increased their total fund balance by about 600,000 as well. Barron Expo, Fund 615, they also adjusted their revenue projections. Their revenue projections last month was 2.6 million, and for the year-to-date total resources, now it's up to 2.7 million. So they increased it by $100,000, and it was mostly in the events revenue category. So a little better, their projections now as they refine it as moving into the last quarter. So that means the total fund balance also moved up by about 100,000 because their expenditure requirements stayed about the same. No changes on the other areas for them until we get to RV Park Fund 618 on page 96. Again, not a lot of money, but just for that fund, it's a little more significant. Their revenues increased by about 12,000 in their projections, but they have a savings of about 20,000 in their expenditures. So their net fund balance, they're projecting to increase by about $30,000. So ending this year at 214,000 or 82,000 above what their original projection was on the budget for the RV Park. No changes in the risk management fund or actually in the health benefits fund or 911 either, but I will just point out for the health benefits fund 675 on page 99. Again, actuals year to date, total fund balance, if you look at the end, 11.4 million is where we're at today, but we won't stay at that number. We're not projecting to stay at that number. We are projecting by the end of the year, 8.4 million. We'll see where that lands as we know those last month. The last 2 years, this last quarter is where we got our surprise. So we hope there's no last quarter surprise this year. The trends so far this year are favorable. That's why we're looking at some good numbers, but we'll see where we end up at the end of the year.
What was the projection last month?
Last month, it was at 8.4 also.
4?
Yeah, the year-end projection didn't change because we're still anticipating it to stay on target.
Can I just rewind
Yeah.
to health services, that OHP reserve you were talking about?
Yeah.
I think you said it was going to increase by something like $6 million. But looking at the 274 for behavioral health. I mean, even the ending fund balance, that's not $6 million. I mean, so I'm just curious, where in the system here is that $6 million coming from?
Yeah, it's within revenues, any excess revenue that they have in these funds, they transfer over into their OHP reserves. Any eligible that was in there. One thing you'll see and this is page 84 in the packet, Health Services Behavioral Fund 274. On the transfer section line here, you'll see transfers in OHP Mental Health. So they had budgeted $3.9 million for transfers in from their OHP Mental Health, which is a reserve. It's that reserve. They're only going to transfer in only about $1.9 million, which is $2 million less. So that leaves $2 million more in there than they originally budgeted. So as they need the funds, they transfer into their operating funds from the reserve. And if they don't need it, then they move it over to the reserves until the time they need it for operating or construction, capital, different projects.
And then the other, when you were just describing how, when revenue comes in excess of the cost, I mean, it's kind of like on a per service basis, we got reimbursed for supporting this client this way, this much more than it cost us, and so the kind of the delta that's going over to the going over the reserve right now, or is it?
It has to do with their capitation and their rates, and it is a complicated model, so I don't want to get into the details too much or answer that here. But within, when they come in with the budget committee, they'll be answering that as well, because it is all related in those accounts.
I'm really happy that they're still building that reserve, but
Correct.
I'm just curious.
And
How?
that may not be the projection, going forward,
Right.
but currently, that's their current projection. Good question. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. End of 3 quarters.
That's right.
Item number 4 is preparation for public hearing for temporary hardship dwelling text amendment. As reviewed by the planning commission.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, Senior Planner with Deschutes County Community Development. And today I'm here to prepare you for your public hearing on Wednesday, April 23rd regarding text amendments related to temporary hardship dwellings. So this is a staff initiated text amendment from our work plan. And the general goal is to align our local code with current state law and also create some consistency in how we review and process and evaluate hardship dwelling applications across the different zones in Deschutes County. So Deschutes County has allowed temporary hardship dwellings since 1979. These are second dwellings on a property intended to allow for a property owner or their relative with a medical condition to essentially receive care on that property, so be able to retain some independence while still receiving necessary medical attention. It's currently allowed in all zones that allow for a single family dwelling as an outright permitted use, and our farm and forest zones as well. You can use for your structure for a temporary hardship dwelling, either an RV, recreational vehicle, manufactured home, or in our resource zones, you can use an existing building that's converted. So that's something like an accessory structure, like an art studio, a garage, a man cave, if you will. You can convert that into a hardship dwelling for the duration of that hardship. But you do need to be able to convert it back to that accessory use once that hardship is no longer active on the property. So some of the notable updates that we're proposing to the code is adding clarity that hardship dwellings may be for either the aged or the infirmed. This is consistent with state law. So many folks may not have a diagnosed medical issue, but they may need medical assistance just to address challenges with getting older. So we clarify our code to be more aligned with state law in that regard. we're proposing to revise our renewal requirements to allow for a medical practitioner's note to confirm the necessity for a hardship dwelling rather than a doctor's note. So we do see quite a few folks who go to a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. So it just makes that bucket a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more flexible. And we'd also, through this, are proposing to revise our renewal timeline for these hardship dwellings from having to check in and demonstrate you still need it every 1 year to every 2 years. And that's consistent with state law and again allows a little bit of flexibility. We're also proposing to add a disclaimer that this can only be, this could be only 1 second dwelling on the property. So with our new allowances for ADUs and RVs as rental dwellings, we want to make it clear that from those menus of options, you can only have 1 additional dwelling on the property in conjunction with the primary dwelling.
So that means if you have the RV dwelling, the ADU, or the ADU dwelling, you can't have a hardship dwelling?
That's correct. Yes,
You got one of those three.
exactly. That's correct. There are a few policy considerations that the board could discuss through this process that the Planning Commission did discuss. So outside of the requirements of state law, we are proposing a couple of other changes. The first is to expand the use of existing buildings. So as I mentioned, they're currently allowed in farm and forest zones per statute and administrative rule. And we couldn't find any restriction on allowing these in unincorporated communities or in our rural commercial zone, all of which those allow for single family dwellings as an outright use. We did originally propose to extend this flexibility to the rural residential 10 and multiple use agricultural 10 districts, but there is an Oregon administrative rule provision that explicitly prohibits that. So in the OAR, the rural residential rule, it notes that if you are placing a hardship dwelling on a property in RR10 or MUA 10, it needs to be an RV or manufactured home. So that has been since removed from our proposal. Excuse me. We also discussed this with the Planning Commission. They were supportive of expanding the use of existing buildings. They were disappointed it couldn't be allowed in the MUA 10 and RR10, but again, they were supportive of following state law and removing that from the draft. The second item relates to how we define existing building. There's no definition in state law. So we have an existing definition in our code of an existing building having existed as of March 29th, 2017 or earlier. That's essentially just the date of the last code update. So we're proposing to switch to a rolling 2-year timeframe based on final inspection date. So by the time that you submit for your temporary use permit, your existing dwelling needs to be at least 2 years old, have received final inspection at least 2 years prior. So that adds a little bit of flexibility there.
There's probably some unpermitted structures out there too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that could aid in, coming in, getting your final inspections. So it could assist in getting some of these buildings who maybe weren't officially approved, kind of through that final inspection process and able to be used. Wanted to note we are proposing an additional limitation for existing buildings regarding improvements. So we're proposing to limit improvements to only that within the existing floor area. One of the concerns here is that folks might convert an accessory dwelling to the point that it can't be converted back, that it's become an entire second dwelling on the property. So by limiting improvements to the existing floor area, in conversation with our building division and coordinated services, we believe this would allow for minor improvements like adding wiring for a kitchen, a bathroom facility, maybe a closet, but it would again avoid a very large addition to an existing shed or art studio. The last item that we're proposing is to carry over existing requirements for recreational vehicles that are a bit more restrictive than state law. So these are requirements that the RV needs to have proof of licensing. It needs to be highway ready. It needs to have quick disconnect utilities, a bathroom, and through this we're actually clarifying that it needs to have at minimum a sink and a toilet, which is in line with the RV as residence text amendments that we had. And no permanent additions or attachments. And really this is to ensure from previous kind of code enforcement cases that the RV is fit for inhabitation, that it's not inoperable, it could be moved from the property and it's safe to live So we are proposing to keep those in with that minor change to the bathroom definition. The Planning Commission held their public hearing on March 13th. We received 2 comments, one written and one oral, both generally expressing support for the amendments for the cleanup of the code. And the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval of the text amendment package with that exclusion of the existing building expansion for R10 MUA 10 zones. And we have updated that into the current draft. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Set up for a public hearing on that.
So Nicole, you sort of touched on this a couple times, but I'm still trying to get my head around how this opportunity for a medical hardship dwelling relates to unauthorized ADUs that people have built. I mean, people, when you come forward and seek a permit for a hardship dwelling, I mean, will they come out and look at the existing building and say, you're not allowed to use this because you built this ADU without approvals, and then kind of on the tail end, I was sort of following you on, okay, you can only make improvements that you need to make go away at the end of the time that this has been used as a medical hardship dwelling, but then how is that actually, is there any checking or enforcement of that at the end of the process?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll start with your second point, your second question, if that's okay. So in regard to the decommissioning process, we do note in the code kind of some of the specific parameters. So if you have an RV, you have to remove it. If it's a manufactured home, you can either remove it or convert it to kind of an accessory use, and then same with existing buildings. We do have an inspection type, and this, let me behind me to see if Peter's here. So we do have a process essentially to verify that when a use is no longer active, that the building is being decommissioned if it's an existing building. We have a process, I believe it's now within the planning department, to essentially check in on our active RV manufactured home and existing building approvals for the temporary hardship dwelling process, and confirm if we haven't gotten a doctor's note, if we haven't gotten a note from the property owner, we follow up with them. And then if it is again decommissioned, we have an inspection type to go out and verify that it has been decommissioned or converted. So we do have a tracking system in place, and that's in partnership with planning and code enforcement. In regard to your concern about illegal ADUs that are built potentially without permits, am I understanding that correctly? Without building division approval. So I believe typically when we have an application come in, if it's an existing structure, we would look if it has final building approval. If it doesn't, it could potentially be looped in with code enforcement. If there's a way, I think, to make that a useful structure for a temporary use permit, if it could come into compliance with the code that way, I think that could be a path through code enforcement, which is beneficial to the property owner, but also ensuring that we don't have a non-compliant structure on a property. But I'm not sure, when we were discussing this text amendment process, with our code enforcement division and our building division, they do review kind of the structures, I believe, if we have concerns about them, but I don't believe that they expressed specific concern about conversion of illegal RVs. Typically, it's more the, it's having a manufactured home on the property, or just wanting to bring in an RV. But if Peter had anything to add, feel free to.
I mean, I guess, we know we have a lot of unauthorized ADUs out there. And if you built that and you may have somebody living in it already, they're trying to stay off the radar, maybe. I mean, they're not letting us know that there's somebody living there. And our temporary hardship dwelling program is not going to catch that necessarily. Is that kind of the way to think about it? That this is just kind of a whole separate area of code compliance.
Yeah,
issues?
I mean, I think it's a great question. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. I mean, you are correct, Commissioner, that I think it's targeting those that want to take advantage of a medical hardship opportunity based on their family. I think it gets much more complicated to try to take those opportunities and then apply them to someone or to constituents or, residents, neighbors who have illegally built a structure that's being used for an accessory dwelling unit, as the board's well aware, there are certain parameters set under state law that have distance limitations from the primary dwelling. When we think about converting, to your previous question, converting properties that have fulfilled the medical hardship circumstance and they need to get back in the code, I mean, we would be obligated to make sure that if it was a structure that the 220 was pulled. But it's, I think for the time being, this is opening it up, and our society and the board has heard this on many occasions, the desire to age in place with extended family, and I think this is a tool that can help make that more available, and then staff can work with the board and the legislature to see if there are if there's a willingness to modernize these programs so they get closer to what you're talking about, where you can accommodate this opportunity for a hardship circumstance, and if someone finds themselves in code enforcement, the ability to convert with the requisite permits to legalize such a use. So that's how I would weigh the two questions, but it's an excellent statement, and code enforcement, does monitor the medical hardship dwellings that we have through regular notices and whatnot. So it remains complicated.
I mean, based on what you've shared, I feel okay just thinking about this text amendment as an opportunity to make the medical hardship dwelling program work better, provide good opportunities for people to meet that need. And deal with the code enforcement issues around unauthorized ADUs.
Thank you for the question.
I have lots of that.
Yeah.
Like who is actually, there's someone in CDD that actually is following up on that medical hardship, because I've heard, contrary to that story, that they're actually being monitored. And then we have all those illegal ADUs in the county that I know still exist, because I hear about them from people, either we're watching them now, or it's something that's been here for like 20 years and then they have to rip it out, and we cause a lot of frustration in the community because we do have a housing crisis at some point, and people are doing someone a good deed and then what happens?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Dare.
Well, I wouldn't thank me, but
Well, I mean,
I'm just telling
it's a
you.
good, these are good questions, and there are several remarks that I can provide some context. In terms of the medical hardship dwellings, every year, as Nicole noted, there's an obligation to receive an updated letter from a physician that documents that the family member still has a medical circumstance, and we don't question that. It's just they're the authority figure, subject matter expert. That's duly noted.
Did you just say there could be a PA now? I mean, it didn't have to actually come from a physician?
Correct, so that's a proposed item, so the board could weigh in on that. In our experience, what we've heard from code enforcement is that many folks have their primary care provider as a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner. So it's usually a primary care provider. We could potentially tweak the language to say that, but again, it just provides.
We just have to tweak it.
Yeah, it just provides a little bit more of an allowance for what's on the ground happening. I did just want to note just briefly, the Planning Commission asked how many were active currently, and so I think that's an interesting number. So about 143 total properties have active approvals for temporary hardship dwellings. That's of March 7th, I believe. when we pulled that information. In the last 2 years, so between February 2023 and February 2025, we've received about 18 applications for non-resource zones. 10 of those were RVs, 6 were manufactured homes, 1 was a change of occupant, and 1 was use of an existing building, and that was allowed through an ADA reasonable accommodation. So typically, again, you don't see existing building usage in non-resource zones. In resource zones, we had 7, and I can provide this information to in a subsequent memo, so you have it. We received 7 applications. 1 was a change of occupant, 2 existing buildings, and 4 manufactured homes. So the planning commission had assumed that it was a potentially much larger number. But so through the process, and Peter, you can potentially talk more about the process, code enforcement and planning work together to essentially follow up on the annual noticing requirement. So if we haven't, again, gotten that doctor's note on that annual deadline, then we follow up and confirm if the use is no longer active, it might result in a potentially a code enforcement case, or the decommissioning process, but feel free.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, thank you for citing the statistics, that we are, with Angie Havanier's leadership and with the assistance of our IT specialists, we are able to kind of automate these reminders, you know, for the approximately 100 medical hardships. They get a letter that reminds them to submit an updated letter for that documentation. If that doesn't happen for a few of those, then it does go into code enforcement, and then the question becomes how soon do we address that discrepancy? And oftentimes it's not an eminent public health and safety issue in terms of a failed septic system, you know, an illegal structure. So our team gets to it. It's a mid-level priority. So our team gets to it as soon as they can. We're hoping that this automation will provide more accountability, because the reminders are going to be regular, and then we can presumably kind of bundle enforcement if we see that there's a surge of those that are not providing that follow-up information. So it's a balancing act to ensure that we are nimble enough to stay accountable to those issues that really require our attention immediately for the circumstances or examples I've provided. But it's ongoing, and we understand that there are residents, neighbors, constituents that experience a neighbor that has a hardship or one that may be illegal, and then the question becomes how responsive can we be to those circumstances, and that remains a work in progress.
And as I had mentioned previously, you know, we have the ability to be more restrictive than state law, just due to the way that this is listed specifically in the farm and forest zone statute and rule. So again, the change to the doctor's notes, the change to the annual renewal period from 1 year to 2 years, we were proposing to amend those to be slightly more flexible and provide more consistency with the intent of state law. But the board has the option to be more restrictive, so that could be part of the discussion on Wednesday.
One more question. So in my mind, I'm trying to compare this to the RV as rental dwelling kind of program that we are just about to approve.
May 7th.
And so you know, in the scenario that you're using an RV for a temporary medical hardship dwelling versus, you know, an RV as a rental dwelling. The RV as a rental dwelling, there's more requirements around infrastructure, right? You basically have to have a one site RV park with hookups, with all the hookups.
Correct.
In the medical hardship dwelling, you don't have those requirements. But the medical hardship dwelling is, you know, kind of being offered like on an emergency basis, basically.
It's temporary.
To take care of someone, you know, who's ailing.
Correct.
Okay, so the costs for the people providing the medical hardship dwelling, you know, the upfront costs or the infrastructure costs are gonna be lower but it's supposed to be temporary.
If I may, just, sorry, jump on your toes. The medical hardship for the disposal of on-site wastewater, that can be through a pumping arrangement. So as long as we get documentation that someone's gonna come out and pump that septic system, that is gonna be much cheaper than having to do an authorization permit to ensure that the existing septic system can handle the waste of an RV as a rental dwelling. And the same for the pedestal, there's a pedestal that has to be established for the RV as a rental dwelling to ensure the electricity and the hookups are all plumbed to code. The medical hardship dwelling, I'll transition back to you, that doesn't have the distance requirements, and the board did provide some guidance on those amendments. But the medical hardship allows for a little bit more freedom, so I'll transition to you for any, sweet tag team.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of case law at the state that actually came out of Deschutes County. And that again, it is intended to be a temporary use. So that is part of what LUBA weighed in on, as part of the application, is ensuring that, you don't have a primary dwelling that's way on the northeast corner of the property and the hardship dwelling on the southwest corner of the property. They are intended to, essentially kind of utilize some of the same facilities at a temporary scale. And as Peter mentioned, we have some kind of flexibility through the code enforcement process, but again, we have some requirements from the state that again ensure that property owners see this as being a temporary use, and to avoid installing permanent on-site facilities to support it.
Question, so I was just trying to remember the temporary medical hardship dwelling. Can you put a caregiver? I mean, it's in the family, right? So, but can you put the person who's ailing in the primary dwelling, and then have somebody else live out in that?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. There's some case law from Lane County in 2021 that described the situation. I won't go into details because that one was a very complicated situation. But the key point is that LUBA essentially weighed in and said that a couple things. The person suffering the hardship needs to be the existing resident or a relative of the existing resident, and the existing resident needs to live in the primary residence. So let's say the existing residence has the hardship. They could have a caregiver, related or not, living in a temporary hardship dwelling. Let's say that the existing resident does not have a medical condition or does not need care. Their relative could live with them in the existing dwelling and have a caregiver live in the temporary hardship dwelling. Or that relative requiring care could live in the hardship dwelling themselves and receive care from the existing relative or someone who just comes to the property. So LUBA essentially said, you have flexibility in determining the arrangement as long as it's a existing resident relative and that the existing resident's living in the primary dwelling.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Set up for public hearing on Wednesday this week.
Excellent. Thank you very much, commissioners.
And
Ready.
I will be here, so I'll have to watch.
All right, thank you.
Item number 5, Deschutes County property,
Have our colleagues give them back to you.
East of Redmond code enforcement violation. This is Deschutes County opening code enforcement on ourselves, so.
I guess it's me.
Thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
and I have Angie Havenier, who will be walking in momentarily, our administrative manager who oversees code enforcement. Look at that, right on cue. And we have other colleagues who have been involved in the code enforcement case. Some other staff, to the extent, just for people that are watching remotely, and we have members of the public here. We have Carolyn Young, our code enforcement officer, who's the point of contact. Dan Smith, who's our lead code enforcement officer. We have Stephanie Marshall, senior assistant legal counsel, and Christy Bollinger, who's the property manager, for everyone to understand the level of coordination that goes into these types of circumstances. I'm, Mr. Chairman, going to, again, for the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director, going to allow Angie Havenier to provide the context for you as noted in the memorandum. And then certainly any and all of us can answer any questions that you may have on this topic as we seek direction from the board. So, thank you.
Oh, just acknowledge, so this is the, it's on our published agenda. We were notified of this a while ago individually as commissioners. And this is the first time we're bringing it to a public board meeting just for discussion and digesting the situation.
One basic question before you get started. When we heard about this earlier, we were talking about multiple county properties all over East Redmond, and then this staff memo talks about the complaint being at 1002 Northeast 17th Street. So just kind of
Absolutely.
clarify that for me.
Absolutely. So this parcel is a large parcel, and it's tax lot 1513000000103. And that tax lot as a whole has been assigned multiple addresses for access, for dispatch access. So
We anticipated you would want,
And there's
so we're, we'll just, we're ready for deploying resources to you.
Yeah, so each access has a reference address, but the parcel is one parcel. So in your PIN warning notice of violation, you saw multiple addresses mentioned. That's due to access points. North and west has some different access points, but all the same parcel.
So, I mean, we, in this area,
So
we own
you're-
something like 1,600 acres.
Yes.
Are we, the tax lot 151,
Yep. Yep,
is that
103.
this entire thing, or is that this piece?
That is the entirety. I know that Christy Bollinger is working on a partition. So the code enforcement complaint is this section. We have mapped out this is city jurisdiction is, and this is where Christy Bollinger is mapping out for the partition for Court 3. So this whole thing is what's in code enforcement to date. And that's one parcel with multiple address locations depending on access. So does that clear it up? So
Which ones did you say?
so this is blue is city limits. This is what we're working on for Court 3 for the partition. This is county and that is the map and tax lot. Addresses. This is 17th. So one big parcel is in code enforcement, multiple addresses due to access. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That was interesting. There's 4 different addresses, but one parcel. Any questions on that before we, just to make sure we're talking about the same parcel? So thank you guys for having us here today. I'm Angie Havner, Community Development. And we're, Community Development Department is respectfully asking the board to provide direction as it pertains to code enforcement violations on the county-owned property near the Negus transfer station. Specific violations that have been cited are DCC 18.16.020, camping in exclusive farm use, DCC 18.116.095, RV occupancy, DCC 13.08.010, non-approved wastewater disposal, on-site wastewater, and also that's OAR 340-071-0120, number 2. Work without permits, DCC 15.04.010, DCC 13.36.010 for solid waste accumulation. A history of this specific case is code enforcement received a complaint from a citizen on 914-24. We did raise this to priority 1 due to the public health and safety concerns. Pre-enforcement notice was sent on 9/24/24. Code enforcement sent a 30-day warning on 2/6/25, and then a notice of violation on 3/27/25. We currently have a hearing scheduled for May 6th, 2025 at 1:30. There are 3 proposed options for consideration of the board that we're seeking direction on. Number 1 is to initiate policy GA23 and remove all unpermitted homeless encampments, utilizing a voluntary compliance agreement that encompasses all violations stated in the notice of violation. Number 2 is to hold code enforcement violations contained within case number 247-24-000-300-CE in abeyance. Number 3 is to proceed with code enforcement and the hearing that is currently scheduled on May 6th at 1:30 at the Deschutes County Services Center on Sawyer Room. Staff is available here to provide additional detail or answer any questions that would help the board give us direction and determination.
So this is the 247-300-CE case we're
Correct.
talking about, right?
Correct.
Just making sure
Yes, sir.
terminology is correct.
Yes, no, correct. That's an internal reference that we use for the case reference.
So Angie, do we know how many people we're talking about?
I don't know how many specific people on the map I provided. You can see the yellow. Now I will have a disclaimer, the map is the latest information that we could get from the overlay in June of 24. So the yellow designation is for the solid waste locations. Some of them have encampments associated with them. Some of them are old encampments that have been abandoned. Don't know the count of people that are out there.
From the Redmond managed camp discussions, we have a sense that within the DSL exchange, parcel exchange area, there might be 60 people.
Yeah, I do know when we were looking at the map layers, the current map, due to the cleanup that's been happening out there, some of that solid waste has been shuffled onto the eastern property from what I know you guys have been working hard to clean it up along with Christy Bollinger for the big plants. So just the aerial photos and then just driving on site. But I don't know how many people are there. We did get an estimate for potential cleanup from the local contractor for solid waste specific currently as it stands as of last week. And he did a breakdown, not of people, but solid waste as a whole, what exists on that property.
One of my first questions is, so this is similar, at least in some ways, to what we experienced with North Juniper Ridge, North Bend. Were these basically the same 3 options that we had to deal with that situation? And, you know, if so, are we basically doing number 2, option number 2 in North Juniper Ridge right now with the temporary safe stay area?
Correct. That was what code enforcement was directed to do, was keep code enforcement in abeyance on Juniper Ridge.
And but was it these same 3, basically these same 3 options?
We had not
Looking at
seen,
North Juniper Ridge.
when we say North Juniper Ridge, is that's AKA, that's where the temporary safe stay area is currently applied. So certainly we had not scheduled a hearing. So there was a lot of internal coordination and external coordination with the Juniper Ridge property just because of the association with the city of Bend. I would say the community development department has been consistent with both, that there is, as noted in the memorandum today and noted in prior correspondences regarding Juniper Ridge, our department has identified an eminent public health and safety hazard. And based on our regulatory responsibilities, we were obligated to communicate that responsibility to the Board of County Commissioners. We would certainly have, well, so I think that's the similarity. The options here are as they're laid out are different because we're not engaging another municipality in a coordinated effort to try to establish a temporary safe stay area. These are the three options that we felt were available to the board. As the facts noted or summarized in the memo, again, articulate as this is a significant issue, further underscored by our understanding of the EMS response to the region, which has been significant.
Do we have any numbers? Because I know that Bend had 81 fires last year, but started by the transients. So and I know I was out there on the eastern side and there was actually a garden. The corn was like taller than me. And it was unbelievable with the picket fence. Have you been out there, Jen? Yeah, when we got there, I was like, oh my God, what did you put a well in? Because, yeah, their garden looked lovely.
I do. So on the
Thank you.
map, the red dots are dispatch calls for the since 2020. Some of them are overlaid. There's just been under 2,600 dispatch calls out there. On the paper that I just handed out to you,
On the backside.
categorizes them. If you flip it on the backside, you'll see 282 in 2020, 373, 2021, 405, 22, and then it continues. 2024, there was 665 to date. This year, there's been 229. And then I did a breakdown for you of types of calls to dispatch and then categorized it on maps.
You did that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm very impressed.
Yeah, we wanted that just because we were referencing in the memorandum, first responders and safety.
And it only shows 15 total of mental behavioral health AMI. I would have thought more,
What
out of 2,600.
what is civil service? What can you define that category?
If they are passing out papers if it is for restraining orders, handing out documentation. This also, just for you to know, since we mentioned it, this is an estimate I got from Central Oregon Biosolutions for an estimate for cleanup of solid waste as of last week, as it stands, right?
I haven't seen.
It's 500,000.
Do you want like a copy? I've got plenty of copies if you guys would like. I brought extra. Nick, would you like a copy?
I can help, sure.
So Eric, what we paid for before, a couple, like in maybe, what is it, 18 or something? I know we cleaned up out there. Do you remember what we spent?
We can look at the record from property, I think it was before Christie's time.
Yeah. I mean, I know we spent some money then cleaning it up.
And this estimate is for this entire area
No,
or just for?
Just this part outside of the blue seals and the seals. Core 3.
So,
Just
okay,
outside of
Outside
the
the
blue.
city limits and outside of the North.
Yes, correct.
That actually was another question that I had.
That, I'm sorry, that estimate does not include about 100 vehicles that are out there. That would be a separate contract for the vehicle removal.
Did you say, does it include core 3 or not?
Does not.
Not, that's what I was afraid of.
And that does connect to another question, which is, so yeah, part that's inside the Redmond UGB.
Yeah.
That's not our code.
No, and that was not, that they did pull dispatch calls and solid waste on there, but that was not part of the data. We extracted that. It was just done on the overlay mapping. So like 17th, it's on City of Redmond. That none of that was included. That does, I'm sorry, dispatch calls are included.
Okay,
Yeah.
dispatch calls includes all the
Correct, sir.
property.
Yes.
The cleanup estimate is outside of core 3 and outside of the UGB.
Correct.
And to be clear, land that's not annexed inside the urban growth boundary is technically under our jurisdiction, but we have a joint management agreement with the city of Redmond for land use. And so at that point, who's responsible to fulfill those obligations? My argument would be that these are land use violations because you have encampments that are not permissible in that zone. So it's a nuanced response to your question, Commissioner Chang. It's a zone that we control, but we delegated that responsibility to the city, and it's up to them to enforce the codes per the joint management agreement.
So, but they're enforcing our codes. Until it's annexed.
Correct.
They would be enforcing
Those
our
are
codes.
correct.
Within the RU.
Yeah, it's an urban holding zone. That's exactly correct. I think it's Title 21.
I do want to note that estimate is very high level. It was just a request, so we can kind of discuss what we're talking about at a high level, but not to hold the company to it. That was just an estimate.
We anticipated that you would have questions, and you do, and we wanted to provide you the context as Angie has offered with the mapping, and that we figured you would be asking about complaints, the response time, and then giving you an estimate of which of course is commensurate with kind of the significance of the violations out there. So that's why we had that information here to the extent that you were interested in it. So again, it's just for context, but to Commissioner Chang's one of his initial questions is, what is the community development department's, we're seeking direction from the board. And so while there's the COIC property, the Core 3 property, there's the DSL property for the land exchange, we're looking for direction on the tax lot 103. And as noted in the background, we have information that we could provide you if you wanted more context about the significance of the severity of what these encampments represent in terms of eminent public health and safety. We think it's significant, which is why we wanted to have this conversation with you this afternoon to get direction. And so those are the three options that Angie has noted is what are we looking for? And you certainly don't need to give us direction today. This is a lot to consider, but we do have a scheduled public hearing with a code enforcement hearings officer very soon.
Who will be the officer then, Carol? Who's the officer for that, May 6th?
Carolyn Young is the specialist.
Oh, lucky,
And-
okay.
Yeah.
But I would suggest, that this isn't something that, having the community development department engage legal counsel to seek code enforcement essentially on property management, that's gonna get really complicated, which is why we wanted to have this conversation and seeking direction with you enough time where you could provide that, knowing that if nothing else, that's a fallback, but it will, I gather, raises complexity with legal counsel as well. Anyway, a lot to unpack, but
And
That's-
this is different than the North End of the Ridge, where we're doing a temporary safe stay area in conjunction with the city of Bend. But it is similar in some ways in that the county is working with the city of Redmond to set up a managed camp, down in the corner of the subject property, which is going to have capacity for a significant number of people, but which is not going to be completed until Thanksgiving, maybe. So that's something we need to weigh into our consideration here as well. Also, you know, oftentimes when we are hearing about a code complaint by a resident, the property next to that, they're concerned about the property right next door to them, which is of limited size. I mean, we are talking about a massive area right here. And it would be helpful for me to understand the complainant, where in this context they are, because you know, if they would be content with code abatement being done kind of in their near vicinity, to make it so that they're not experiencing direct impacts from these encampments, that's a very different situation than trying to remediate these issues across this entire property. So can you give a sense, you don't have to pinpoint or anything, but can you give a sense of where this complaint is emanating from?
So the complainant specifically? So complainant, I can say, so by policy, as you know, the complainant is kept confidential until the case is closed. And I can tell you that it's a resident of the community.
The northeast side of.
Northeast and out of Redmond, not adjacent to, in that general vicinity of Redmond.
Not a
I said
neighbor of
northeast,
this
northwest of the,
Not a neighbor of that property.
they were in the kind of, my understanding is kind of the north, closer to 17th Street than where the COIC property is. Is that your?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't really residences down
Right.
in this neck of the woods.
Yeah, the context of it is they used to ride, years ago, ride their mountain bike out there. Had recently moved to that area, went to ride their mountain bike out there and was surprised at what they had seen. So that was the catalyst of them submitting the complaint. And then it's concern also for the groundwater, all of the things for public health and safety.
I mean, we all have a sense of how deep the groundwater is in this area, right? I mean, whether
And I
there's
think-
really gross stuff, on the ground surface in this area or not. This isn't, in North Juniper Ridge, human waste going in irrigation canal laterals, that was a significantly greater public health concern than anything that could be happening out here affecting groundwater that's 600 feet down.
I would also say the complainant was concerned about just solid waste, of fire, all of the things that encompass that. And I don't want to share too much broadly, but their profession also was a concern. They submitted it as a citizen. And I do want to respect the policy that they will be kept confidential until the case is closed. And then, as far as this county properties, the county owns a lot of property. So as we're getting in code enforcement, enforcing throughout the community, I anticipate if we get continued property, that's also something as a county, as code enforcement, we're going to have to determine what direction we're going. Case by case, I would imagine, but also a consideration for code enforcement.
So yeah, we're the Board of Commissioners. When people come to me and say, what's a commissioner? I say, well, we're the front end of the county. We have the budget policy authority of the county. We represent the people's land here as an asset of Deschutes County citizens, future development area for the city of Redmond, master planning being talked about out there. We've donated land, this North Point Vista, working on swapping land for the expansion of the fairgrounds. Core 3 is a great opportunity that just resonates in the state of Oregon and all across the state these days. Hopefully we'll get the next capital to move forward with that. We've donated the land in the bottom corner here I went and spent a couple weeks, in the fall and then in the spring, 2 1-week periods, camping in the south area over there, knowing that we just need to turn the corner on this. We need to proceed. We need to not be blown out by unsanctioned, unauthorized camping. This place erupts after sunset and people are zigzagging all around. Trees are being cut down, wood's being sold for necessities for living. Coming to the conclusion that it's okay to dispose of human waste or oil and antifreeze on the ground because it's deep groundwater. I wouldn't go there at all.
No, that's not what I was saying.
Well, okay, so I don't mind stepping into this. We've been kind of dancing around the city of Redmond. Well, how are we gonna proceed? Well, let's build some more resources and talk about making some plans. I've been ready to proceed for 2 years. This is kind of coming to a head. If we go to so one question specifically, if we go to a code enforcement hearing from a hearings officer, we're pitting our open code enforcement case with our property managers and us representing the county, saying we're violating our own rules.
Commissioner,
But I mean, what would come out of that? So we have, a hearings officer says, yes, the code says nobody camps here and there's somebody camping here, so we're in violation, right? I mean, that would be the outcome of it.
Oftentimes.
We don't need to go down it too far, yeah.
Oftentimes too, we also get time to correct as part of that, so we can acknowledge that it's a violation. And then the ask would be time to correct, and then that would be in the hearings on the order. And that happens weekly with other residents, is yes, the violation's acknowledged and then time to correct that it's reasonable.
So the time to correct would be given to us as in, let's figure out that horizon of activity and action instead of defining it a temporary safe area, which we've done in the north side of Bend here. And now we're spending $14,000 a month on porta potties, potable water and trash service, which sometimes end up burning in place and costs us money there too.
I think that the challenge of going to a code enforcement proceeding when we have utilized them in the past is there's an impasse between the community development department and coordinated services working with the responsible party. The responsible party has chosen not to consider a voluntary compliance agreement. Has been cited because the problem remains unaddressed, and so the hearings officer proceeding, the notice, the citation, is then compelling that party to come to an independent hearings officer, an independent attorney, and we, my colleagues, present the evidence, which it doesn't have to be an encampment. It can be what we were talking about in the agenda item before. It could be a illegal structure. It could, and so we're presenting this evidence, and then the responsible party gets their due process to articulate their rationale, their reasoning. I think to the extent that the board wants to find a way to reconcile this, I'm not sure you need to go to a hearings officer proceeding to decide ourselves.
It's pretty obvious that, no camping in an EFU zone means nobody camping there for long-term unsanctioned. So I would acknowledge this, and I support that. We don't need a review by hearings officer.
Yes. Yeah, and
So as I say, we put in policies. We've tried to figure out, okay, how do we deal with this? Voluntary compliance agreement is, gives you time. It's like, we're gonna get there. Let's define what we need to do. So then it's just a relationship with us as leaders of Deschutes County and the expectation of the community members that have been set up out here, and the fact that the end state will not be this. So we've been in this position for years now. I've asked to do a temporary area, a long-term visitor area, a defined area on about 40 acres for people to be at. Sign a paper that says that you shall live by some community norms here. Hasn't been supported. City council doesn't support it either for whatever reason. There's design and plans to build more facilities here. Still doesn't really resolve, unsanctioned, long-term, free range situation. Remember, the free range citizen is what we're dealing with here. As I say, I'm not even looking at it with anger or vengeance. It's just that free range situation can't be done here. So I mean, if there's support for proceeding, I'd like to, put some direction to this, but we've been down this path a few times.
Are you done giving your analysis?
I got more, but I can stop for now.
I would gladly give an alternative.
Well, as I say, there's three of us here. We'll see where we can go.
Okay, so I would say we haven't been in this position for years now. We have been creating this position, creating this situation for years by trying to say that something needs to be done and then doing nothing. Not being willing to make investments, not being willing to make hard decisions, not being willing to push for needed projects when there are neighbors who are opposing them. So we helped to create this situation. This is not all our fault, but we could have been doing more.
Commissioner Chang, we gave
May I
900
finish?
No, because
May-
you're saying we haven't done anything, and we've done a lot of things. I went door to door in Redmond with the safe parking program. We gave 900,000 for the Bethlehem Inn. And how many people live there that we were told we're gonna be ADA? Yes, we did that. And then we've got the Shepherd's House right there, right by the railroad tracks in Redmond. There are a whole bunch of things that have been done the last couple of years, and we have been supporting of those. And so where are all these people coming from? And who's actually then at Shepherd's House? Because that place is full, and I really don't see ever very many cars at the Bethlehem Inn.
And the proactive things that we have helped.
And the safe parking has been.
And the proactive things that we have helped move along are the only reason that there's not twice as many people living out there.
Well, did you see what happened to Lane County? Their homeless numbers from last year went from 2,100 to 4,800. Now, I can't get the town count number from Deschutes County for some reason, but that's a good one. But Portland, you saw from 23 to now, it's over double. So you guys, this is a huge problem. We have done a lot of things in Redmond, and have we accomplished anything? Because when I went to 17th Street the other day and I saw it, I just about cried because it looks like we haven't done a thing. And yet I know I drive by the Bethlehem Inn all the time and I keep wondering, where are those 35 cars that should be there, like at least on the weekends or in and out. It's just really amazing. And then when I go to Bethlehem, the Shepherd's House, that's a busy program. I walked through that building, that seems to be full. So who's coming? Who is coming here? And the Nova Apartments, which is not homeless, but it's workforce, that opened up 2 months ago, and thank you, Hayden Homes, it's already full. I think it's like 24 studios, but it is full. So we have done a lot of things. Well, actually Hayden Homes did that with the city of Redmond. So, I feel like we've done a lot, but when you go out there and you think and you see somebody with a yard and a garden that's like they look like they have a well, we really let this go on way too long, and have their friends all join them. I don't know. It's unbelievable when you see all these red dots. And when I see 17th Street and I think, oh my gosh, Medline is right there. Medline, an international company, they have been so bloody patient for, they've got the barbed wire and everything, and they've done all this to keep their plants safe. But it's, it clearly looks like, I'd love to have the red dots dotted. Are they all still problems, Angie?
So the red dots are just under 2,600 dispatch heads.
Those are the called points of reference.
Points of reference.
Okay.
And I did that specifically to compare where the solid waste encampments, how it's associated. And then also because in the memorandum, we noticed recognized safety for first responders.
You look at the millions, billions of dollars that we have spent in this country, in Oregon, in California, on the homeless, and it's like, what's our end game? Where are we going to actually turn the corner? And I find that we already have 229 calls are year to date already. So it's not, the trend is not good. It doesn't look like it's cutting back. So no, it's on course to even be worse probably than last year, honestly. Last year. It's gonna be worse. It's gone up 600, 665, and now what are we gonna be, 950 or something? If it holds true. So it's
And just
it's
to mention
sad.
too, as code enforcement, we are enforcing the code equitably every day on private property. So this is RV occupancy, solid waste, unauthorized disposal. Those are violations, work without permits. That's our job for the county as a whole that we've been directed to do. So I just wanted to mention that too, that this is ongoing in our community daily for public health and safety.
Right, it's public health and safety. And all the people I know that have been given a code enforcement, and yet I look at this, or I guess look at this way, you just go, well, yes, we have two different rules. And that's really not right.
And that is something we hear, just recognizing, our concern is for everybody who lives in the community, including the people who live out there, to give them something better. But it's public health and safety for everybody.
It is.
So if I could finish now. There has been a lot of money spent in other places to address these issues. Oftentimes, money spent on the wrong things and wasted. We actually do have a very good understanding in our of what investments and what kinds of facilities and pathways out of homelessness produce results. That is why, between 2023 and 2024, we saw that area, the Bend area and the Redmond area being the only places in Central Oregon where homelessness numbers leveled off and even declined compared to massive increases everywhere else. So we know what we need to do. We know what's successful, and these are great examples of things that we've done in the Redmond area.
That's what I'm saying, we've done all these,
Successful.
we've done all these, and yet the numbers look really bad if you
And-
extrapolate the 229.
And the Redmond area and the Bend area are the only places in Central Oregon where between 23 and 24, the point in time count showed numbers declining. So that is evidence that we know what to do, and we actually aren't doing enough of it yet. The managed camp, that has to be a significant part of our discussion today. How we're going to handle this, at this moment in time, is a perfect example. I mean, we argued about what we were going to do in terms of managed camp for at least a year and a half before we reached a point of agreement with the city of Redmond that this was where we were going to proceed. It takes a little while, or it takes a significant amount of time to actually get something that complicated off the ground. It's coming in November, but it might take, might take a few months longer than that even. But we know that, and we know that Shepherd's House, and we know that, the Bethlehem Inn, we know that safe parking, we know that all of these things are effective tools to help people avoid homelessness or exit homelessness. And we do need to lean in, we need to lean in.
Stop saying we, I've got questions when you're saying some of this stuff,
Yeah.
so.
I know
Who's we?
Yeah, look, we is the people who actually want to do something and not just say
Well, but-
somebody better solve this.
Well, when you say
for
we
us.
wanna do something, it sounds like you're saying we wanna pull out the county checkbook and pay for a whole lot of people's lives, needs and housing for a long term. So we are on the same page when you say that.
We have not been pulling out the general fund checkbook. We have been making expenditures out of our American Rescue Plan funds. Which are almost gone, which if we had chosen proactive, effective things to do earlier, we could have spent our money in very effective ways, and the problem would be that much smaller at this point. So we can choose now whether we're gonna do something or whether we're gonna blame everybody else for not solving the problem.
Okay, thank you. Angie, is that number, your today, is that through like today? Or is it through like
You're asking the specials.
Mhm.
That was last Wednesday,
Okay, I was just trying to calculate if it was like,
correct,
know-
from 2020 to current as of last week.
okay, all right. So it definitely looks like it's not going down, and we have spent a lot of money in Redmond. And apparently, nobody that was out there really wanted to go into all the wonderful things that we provided, you know, such as the safe parking and, you know, the Shepherd's House and the Bethlehem Inn, you know, all those things that really were supposed to help with some of these issues.
You can make the rounds at Safe Parking, Shepherd's House, or any of these places. You will find people who have exited East Redmond. It's just because we're not doing something at a big enough scale doesn't mean it's not effective.
So as to say, I would lean towards starting to initiate our policy and work towards making sure it's a reminder that this is unacceptable utilization of those lands by code, and then work towards removing all unpermitted homeless in campus. As I say, it's not a gavel down, go do it now, it's working in that direction. Now is the time, you know, this is the spring, weather's started nice, we've been in this situation for a few years now. It's happening up and down, you know, our Central Oregon areas. This is definitely a recreational location, used to be horses, bicycles, and off-road bikes, and it's not that anymore. We could work our way back to it. So, I say it, I don't do it with anger or vengeance, there's no judgment, but we've got to do better on it.
Well,
But we
and
need
I'm
to
not,
make a policy choice like that.
right, well, I'm actually hearing that they're now moving out to Sisters. A lot of them are moving out to Sisters, so then again, then we're gonna have more fire danger from that end of the community. I called and left a message this morning with Ian Reed, and Ian, I hear a lot more people are moving out there. So it's, you know, we've got the Old Mill Inn and Suites, it had 76 units there for people that could come in. So there's all these different places within our community, and who's actually using them then? Are they coming from Portland and using our, I mean, I honestly, I guess I need to go door to door and ask them, because we have done so many things here, and it's, by this map, it looks like we still got a major problem. If there have been 229 calls here today. It's too bad we can't know how many, were those all different people, you know, or was it like one person was 15 times? Does that make sense?
Yeah, they do have that data. I didn't ask for that.
Well, I'm just
I
thinking,
was-
you know, because this says, okay, 229 calls. Okay, what, are we really talking about 120 people? You know, it would be good to know, Angie. You know, because we have done so many things, honestly, that to help with the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you guys for all the work that you've done. You know, from the code enforcement lens, we're here asking for direction for violations that we have to work for under our current code for public health and safety for everybody in the community. My heart breaks for the people who live out there, for the people also in the community that are affected. So I think we can always do better, and that's always the goal. And so we're just, through the code enforcement lens is a little bit different, but enforcing the codes that we currently are mandated to enforce is what we're asking direction on. And then with the consideration of the opportunities and choices that we provided today, as we continue to enforce this throughout our county. So thank you for what you're doing, and it's not as we see in this conversation, none of this is simplistic. It's not. And yet we have rules, laws, orders that we're mandated to work under. And that's really what we're asking today.
If I
For
could pull
people that
this.
really want help, honestly, there's help for those people. If they really want help. And then there's those people that really don't want to follow the rules. And we have to convince them that, no, it's really time that you need to follow the rules because you're putting our whole 200,000 people in danger by having people that start fires and all the other things that have been happening on a routine basis in Deschutes County. You've been warned.
There are more people who want to exit homelessness than there are shelter beds and transitional housing slots and wraparound services. Doesn't mean that there aren't services, but there are more people who are ready to exit homelessness than have those resources available to them. There are also people who are out there who are not interested, who want to live off the grid, out of sight, maybe lawless existences. But if we were providing pathways out of homelessness for everybody who wanted to take them, and the only people who were left out there were the people who were the lawless element, we'd be dealing with a whole lot less people. In which I think our sheriff's deputies, service providers, and everybody else will be very happy about. So I'd like to kind of pull this up to the policy level. It's everything that Angie said was true, and we also need to be mindful that if you let people out of an unauthorized camping location, and there is not a pathway out of homelessness for them, they will end up somewhere else, causing more code complaints from somebody else. So maybe at the same time that we really want to address these code complaints, we don't want to just move them from one place to another, which comes back to the question of, what are we doing to create real pathways out of homelessness for people so that we can get ahead of the curve. We do still have way more people experiencing homelessness right now than I'd like to see. It's not because what we're doing isn't effective. Our homeless service providers are moving people out of homelessness every day. The challenge is that new people are becoming homeless every day. And it's sort of like a bathtub spigot and drain situation. Every time you can get somebody out, if there's two more people coming in, then your numbers are going to grow. You at the point where we have lots of exit from homelessness, exceeding the number of people who are entering homelessness every day, we're gonna see numbers improve. So as we look at this, this question of these three options before us, what's really important to me at the high level is that we figure out how to not just move the problem to a new location, but actually reduce homelessness. I could see any of these three pathways leading to meaningful work that reduces homelessness. So I'm open to 1, 2, or 3 here. But what's really important for me is that when we come out of this, we make this decision, we've recommitted ourselves to creating those pathways out of homelessness for people, because we never get ahead of this problem until we stop just shuffling it from one unauthorized location to another.
So currently, 1 in 6 in Oregon are on food stamps. That's 17% of our state. 34% of our state are on Medicaid. We have all kinds of things really going on which makes us a bit more unique than, let's say, like our neighbor Idaho. We have to do something. Angie, what if we could say, okay, we just want you to know that come November, and we can pray that the managed camp is done in November, and if we really push, maybe it will be done, that, hey, this is where you're gonna have to move to. We've got a problem and you need to help us clean up. They need to help us clean up wherever they are.
I think
And I mean, is that too long of a period? We've already waited 8 months since the original sighting, almost 8 months.
Commissioner Adair and DeBonne and Chang, I think the question, obviously, there's three options on the table. The voluntary compliance agreement would give the organization some flexibility. Code enforcement utilizes VCAs. The intention is to see a commitment with a timeline that provides that pathway to resolving the code enforcement. I think that's something that if you were contemplating this managed homeless area, homeless camp on the the southwest corner of this area, that could be a possibility. There is quite a distinction from the VCA versus policy GA23, which required, we didn't include it, but we can summarize it, and thanks to the coordination today with Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel, for just getting into some of the nuances. But GA23 was developed and adopted before Martin v. Boise was overturned. It really provides some explicit direction. We have our colleague here, property management, as I read it or understand it, they basically absorb some significant coordination and responsibility for in collaboration with the board and administration and legal counsel executing some very strong directive to remove the homeless within a certain timeline. There's responsibilities to ensure that possessions, to the extent that they're left behind, are in a safe place for retrieval. So to the extent that you're considering a VCA, that would give the board, the organization, property management, the flexibility with a demonstrative timeline that would be commensurate with the complexity of this area. Again, in contrast to something that is quite direct, that has explicit instructions, and that has some areas that have to be staged for retrieving or ensuring that the possessions are appropriately maintained. So CDD is not here to direct you to what option. We are here, as the memo noted, and I'll just quote the last sentence: the lack of approved sanitary disposal systems and unapproved structures for human habitation warrant immediate attention. So all the options can provide a pathway, presuming that there's a recognition of the significance of not addressing these underlying circumstances over time. Because we'll be right back here, or it'll spill over to another property. I mean, code enforcement understands with the complexity in today's society that homelessness is a problem, and we have a responsibility to manage this program in a way that is equitable across the entire community. So hopefully that was helpful, but again, we're just looking for direction, and by all means, I underestimated the time that I thought would be devoted to this. We can certainly come back next week if it's helpful on April 30th, if you want more time to think about the significance of these options, because each of them are complicated in their own right.
I know, when I first read this and it said, I knew we had some problems around Negus, and I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna talk about that one today, right? The Negus and our transfer station, and the theft and all that was going on, and so we're just not gonna let them camp there, but no, we're talking about bigger situation. But you look at the cost and you think we have got to do something, because, and we have been providing a lot of options. You have to think about the other thing though. If we have 232 people in the jail, 92 or 3% of them had mental illness and or substance use disorder. You have to think about, we have 19 murder cases right now in Deschutes County, and to quote our DA, it's mental health and substance use disorder. So 100%. It's like there's something more going on that we're dealing with. Mental health is really serious, and yet, Deer Ridge is sitting up there half empty. And I know we're building a facility for 16 beds, but that's really a drop in the bucket. If we could temporarily use Deer Ridge to help some people that really seriously need some help, because we really do have they called it an epidemic because the kids in Portland can't read or write. Well, we have an epidemic here.
Eric. Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator. I've been working with property management and legal and CDD on these issues. I just want to add a couple of things that I think are important for the board to consider as you think about the different options. What we're seeing on the tax lot and the compliance issues are the same things we're having on the DSL land and the Core 3 land. The county has prioritized the DSL land, the Core 3, and Juniper Ridge. Those are the focus areas right now. As we all know, we don't have an alternative location, and that's why we're trying to build a managed camp. Until we have an alternative location, we can't move people. The other thing is based on state law, we have to be effectively reasonable and have an alternative location. And it kind of conflicts. I know that the code enforcement, we all recognize the violations. Both the land use, the public health and safety, we all acknowledge that those are not allowed on state law. And we have another state law that says we can't just remove people who are homeless unless we have an alternative location. So to me, my recommendation is that we hold it in abeyance. We continue to focus on the DSL land, the Core 3, and Juniper Ridge. And because we're gonna have to use the same process, and we're still working through the process on those other lands. So to me, let's continue focusing on DSL, Core 3, Juniper Ridge as we work through those processes and relocate people, clean the land. We can use the same formula for the land that we're discussing today.
I mean, I was having similar kind of like triage prioritization thoughts in my head, and I did want to ask about this voluntary compliance agreement option, whether you could actually write that agreement in a phased fashion, right? So that we could say do DSL and we say, well, in this whole property, we're gonna do these two parts first in this time frame, and then we'll see what we can do about the rest. Is that an option for this voluntary compliance agreement pathway, or if we wanted to have that kind of prioritization and phasing, would we really need to just go pursue the advanced option?
Okay. Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel. Great question. Typically, the voluntary compliance agreements, the time allowed for a violator to come into compliance depends on the circumstances, how severe is the risk and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think that it's a policy decision, that code enforcement staff will consider. One of the things that's considered is, how cooperative is the violator being? What steps are they taking? There's a lot of things that go into the mix, but I would certainly say that would be something that that could be considered. Again, the ultimate goal of compliance being the goal of the of code enforcement in general and CDD, of course, within the department. I think that any steps that are taken as outlined in a VCA would be beneficial towards the ultimate goal of code compliance. And I also recognize what Eric Kropp just stated. We've got a couple of competing state laws. We've got the land use system and no camping on EFU zone properties, and the public health and safety risks that are in existence with that type of use. And then, trying to coordinate, phrase in the statute, reasonable means of moving folks without an alternative place to go. And I also think that the policy GA 23 is talking about removing property, not removing individuals, would be added result possibly of once their property is removed, perhaps they will move along. But that is the bigger question that we've been discussing today. That was a very long-winded answer to your short question.
Christie's been ready for a few moments.
Well, thank you, commissioners. For the record, Christy Bollinger, Deschutes County Property Management. I just wanted to bring in just a couple points as you move forward in your decision-making process. If you were to give us the funding to clean up the property, this is not a one and done, right? So let's say we go in there, let's say we remove individuals, or we at least remove their property. It would still be an ongoing process. How would we enforce keeping people off of 1,600 acres? That's a real challenge. We're currently doing that with the DSL property by doing patrols through our security patrol firm about 2 hours a day and trying to kind of nudge people along and let them know that we have an upcoming project on this property, on the DSL property, and that's 137 acres. So far contrast to 1,600 acres. So really that's the one thing I wanted to point out. So even if we were able to go in there, do everything, clean it up, spick and span, how do we continue to do that? So I think that's a really important thing to think about. It's not a reason not to move forward with any of this, but I think it's really important to think about it in terms of how the decision was made.
Well, how much money did we spend before I got in office? I mean, we spent a ton of money out there cleaning up. So, I get what you're saying, but then don't forget in, I think it was like July 1st of 2020, we had the fire out there started by the homeless, 25 flights that were going into Redmond were diverted. I mean, fires out there if they get away, they can really impact this whole region again. So that's a really frightening thing. What can we do to at least clean it up somewhat so that it's not so vulnerable to like a massive fire if there is a wind?
Yeah, I mean, the 2018 cleanup that you referenced, that was mostly on 17th Street, county property that abuts 17th. It wasn't the entire 16. At that time, it was 18.
But I know we spent money, a lot of money.
Yeah, we can get you that information.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was like we spent money, and as you say, we can clean it up, but they'll come right back again if we don't have an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Eric's point, we currently, from what we've heard from the board, the prioritization is DSL exchange to managed camp, core 3, I feel like I said something. Juniper Ridge. And so that's been our focus. The focus has not been on the remaining, 1,000 acres, 1,200 acres, whatever that is exactly in unincorporated Deschutes County.
Is it 1,200 acres, I mentioned?
It is exactly.
The whole parcel 1,600, but I'm
Right,
carving
no,
out.
300
yeah,
is cool.
Carving out core 3, carving out DSL, carving out the others.
Yeah, so currently it's 1,332.54 as a whole, and then you have the carve outs.
Yeah, we have the carve outs on top of that. So, so with that being said, I mean, if the board wants to prioritize differently, we're happy to, work with administration, of course, with the board to fulfill that, but we just need direction on what it is exactly you are wanting. And the funding to do so.
So it'd be a shame if we put more people on a larger parcel by other actions. So as I say, I do kind of come to the concept of it's unacceptable to expand and settle in for the long term. We see a lot of recycling of vehicles that recycling dogs, registered or not, that can be aggressive. So as I say, we need to turn the corner and bring this down a notch instead of thinking we're just going to move somebody from here to here. Remember the long-term visitor area concept, we have 40 acres that's inside the urban growth boundary that we could provide some structured, low overhead, low cost area for people, even if we just do it temporarily, which gives us that place where people are offered to be. And I support that also.
So the managed campus is what, 9 acres? So you're saying use the 40 acres and say, hey, folks, this is where you need to go.
Yeah, just work down the path of how can we define an agreement, a civil permit, 6-month permit, either you stay through the summer season or the winter season, or you can keep doing it, come back, low cost, sign the piece of paper, says I shall live by some community norms and expectations. Permit has a simple fee to it, and then you have garbage service, access to potable water within walking distance. I'm just thinking getting that standpipe out there, kind of like water's gonna be brought to that managed camp. So there's a way to do that, and it's not a big solution, but it is a place for people.
So, but would that meet the requirements of the state that you have to, if you're moving them off, it has to be something that is decent? Would that be decent?
Reasonable, yeah.
Reasonable? Would that
Yeah.
be reasonable?
Well, I will give you the lawyer's answer, which is what's reasonable to one side might not be reasonable to another side, and you're inviting lawyer arguments over what is or is not reasonable. But, you are the policy board and you can make the decision, we believe this is reasonable. We believe this will meet the intent of the
A
statute.
statement of.
So, and legal is always available to guide you, once you're at that point of making a decision.
Okay, I would appreciate it if we bring it back on Monday.
That's fine.
I just wanna say that, the idea of a acre long-term stay area has been discussed multiple times. The fundamental concern is that packing a whole bunch of people in there, without any kind of management or oversight is incredibly dangerous. You're inviting, even in the way more dispersed, unauthorized camping settings that we have around the county currently, we see violence, we see crime, we see fire risk, we see all kinds of things. And if we have told people that they can go someplace and we haven't provided management to ensure that, bad and dangerous things aren't happening, then I think we are responsible for anything horrible that happens in that 40 acres. And I don't think that that's a responsibility or a liability that we want to take on. And at least the last time that we discussed this with the Redmond City Council, they were not interested in that idea either. So I'd like us to kind of move on to more viable, less risky ideas, and actually try to apply ourselves to doing something.
Very offensive the way you say that. Yeah. Very offensive. There's not enough money in the world to buy solutions for people. We've got to try something. As I say, we just see it very differently. But yeah, if we can bring it back next week to talk about the possible long-term visitor. Yeah, because remember, there was a slide deck in front of us. It was a policy choice
If we're
that
talking
didn't
about-
get supported. There was just one person that supported it, but it was a professional slide deck presentation in front of us that we could probably go back and take a look at.
And if we really want to seriously reconsider that, I think it would be appropriate to bring in the city of Redmond.
Oh, not a problem. It's in the city. It's inside the city urban growth boundary. I absolutely agree with that. Okay.
What we're
Thank
doing
you.
now isn't working, so definitely we
We'll
need
bring
to.
it back next Wednesday.
We'll bring it back every week until we get it worked out.
Yeah.
Only because Monday we have a joint meeting. with the
Yeah,
city.
understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Fabulous.
Wait, but Commissioner Dare, you're not going to be here on Wednesday?
This Wednesday, we'll bring it back next.
That's next Wednesday.
August.
You're bringing it back next
April
Wednesday.
30th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and this is what everybody came for from your community development group,
Yes.
this community development
Thank you.
draft work plan.
Thank you.
amendment number six.
We are mindful of your time and your agenda, commissioners. I can have my colleagues come up. I'm Peter Gutowski, the Community Development Director, and it's my pleasure to introduce for the board's consideration the draft fiscal 25-26 work plan for the Community Development Department and the 2024 accomplishments. On May 7th, you will have a public hearing, and I've invited a part of our management team. We've got Randy Scheid, our building official, Todd Cleveland, our on-site wastewater manager, Angie Havenier, our administrative manager, and then special guest, Anthony Regini, principal planner, who's
Special
representing the
guest.
planning division. He knew I was gonna just give him a little rip. I've asked them momentarily to come up and just highlight one or two items of the work plan that are worth noting. Before they do, I will just take a moment to provide context of what the work plan represents, knowing that we have members of the public here today, as well as some that I assume might be listening online, which is very exciting. So first and foremost, the work plan is on the board's agenda if you want to obtain a copy. It's also on the Community Development Department's website. If you find a search engine, you search the Community Development Department work plan, you'll get a copy of this one, and you can see our work plans from previous years. And one thing that I want to emphasize is public input matters. It's welcome. You can submit your comments to the Board of County Commissioners before they're before or at the public hearing on May 7th. You're welcome to submit them to me as well, and the board will take those under consideration. There's a lot of useful information in the work plan for those that want to dabble in it. It lists the board's annual goals and objectives. It describes the Community Development Department's mission statement. You'll learn a little bit more of each of our divisions, and it summarizes the department's fiscal and operational structure. We're a fee-dependent department, and we articulate those experiences, our performance measures, and how we remain accountable. The work plan is based on a couple of things very quickly. The board's annual goals and objectives. We have carryover projects from one year to another at times, and sometimes they're multi-year projects. An example of that is our comprehensive plan update. We also receive grants that help fund certain aspects of the work program. So we get a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office that helps fund the Historic Landmarks Commission. And the other thing that helps define this work program, again, it's a plug for public input. Our community voices matter, and they can help shape the work plan. As I bring it to a close, but then I'll have our managers come up individually, I want to acknowledge that the Community Development Department, and I am biased, provides extraordinary levels of customer service for our residents and for our primary customers, which are the development community. And we're very, very proud of those relationships. And the credit to our success goes to the managers, some of whom are behind me, others that may be listening remotely. The work that the managers and their staff do every day, adapting to an ever-changing work environment, is what really keeps us accountable and responsive to our community's needs. So I was gonna wind it up. I was just, unless the board has any questions of me in the interest of time, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair, but our managers can come up and offer a couple of remarks.
Well, so we heard from our facilities folks today. How's the rearranging of all the offices from the construction, replacing the windows and walls?
You know, it's behind us. A credit to the team, not only our team, but to Lee's staff who helped manage and monitor the contractors who helped replace some windows and shore up some structural aspects to the building. But everyone's reoriented, re-engaged. We have staff that are in the office longer. We've adjusted our hybrid work environment. We've adjusted our operating hours for our lobby, and I think it's going really, really well. One of the benefits of that transition as our building was getting restructured and remodeled is that I got to go downstairs and they got to listen to me down the hallway, but I got a better sense of code enforcement and our permit technicians and our plans examiners. So I think that was healthy for director to spend several months experiencing that just day-to-day work environment. So that's something that I really valued, but we're well structured now, and we've entered conversations with Eric and Kevin Moriarty to the extent that makes sense for Kevin Moriarty's team to be relocated to CDD. We have the space to make that happen. So yeah, it was very successful.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for everybody for being able to manage that, because I think that when I saw Anthony, he was in a big room in a big drafty hall with the windows out and everything. It was a wild ride for a while.
We had a lot of people wearing down coats
Yeah,
during the day in
exactly.
the office.
In the winter and in the
Yes,
spring.
exactly. Okay, well, thank you. Whoever wants to go first, I'll just get out of the way.
I'm not afraid.
Hello, Commissioners. Todd Cleveland, on-site wastewater manager. I'll try to hit the big stuff. So we provided 21 nitrogen rebates last year. We've managed to stay, we thought we were going to run out of money and get a little bit of an injection. So far this year, we've seen that continue, that demand continue. So hopefully if there's the property in the new neighborhood sells, we'll get some influx of funds that we can put into the rebate program and probably into the neighbor impact non-conforming loan program for upgrades of ATTs in South Deschutes County. Property owners could use that assistance. So those are my two things.
So that little infusion was the 5-acre property sale in the Newberry neighborhood.
Yes, $50,000.
And that's all at this point.
It's getting used. I don't know exactly. Sherry said something about she thinks we've done 14 already this year, but I'm not sure if that's correct. I mean, I didn't check it. That was right before I came.
So is there more funding available then?
Not right now. That's
Okay.
why I'm hoping for that new neighborhood
Okay.
that property to sell. in
So
the
we
neighborhood.
max out the funding then, and I mean, honestly, with what the systems cost, it would be really nice if we could help people out more than just $37.50.
Yes, I agree.
It needs to go up.
There's that other track of funds from at the state level.
There's Craft 3 provides funding that comes from DEQ, from the legislature. They're looking at ways to expand that. We had the COIC septic assistance program, which was ARPA funds. That helped, I think 91 folks. So, and 16 in South County for ATT upgrades. So that included Jefferson and Crook County as well. So, but that money's gone, been used up.
What about the more,
5,000 something more systems that need to be upgraded.
Yes, exactly.
what about the systems that are 95% effective? Are those still sitting out there, not available in Oregon?
So they're not really approved. There's a newer system that came that's a Japanese system, but it hasn't become available locally yet. It's called FujiClean that's listed DEQ that's been very high success rate in New York. So high treatment about 90%, 85 to 90%. So that's very high treatment. The other component is an add-on unit, and it's not really it's only on a case-by-case basis currently that we're able to do those variances and such. So special designs. So we'll see. Stay tuned.
Thanks.
Andy.
Thanks a lot. Hello, Commissioners. Anthony Regini, Principal Planner. Again, recognizing that members of the public have been here a while, I'm going to keep this really, really brief. On page 2 of the memo that Peter prepared, you'll note that there are a number of higher priority projects for planning in this work plan year. In there, you've also noticed that the planning commission had their preferred priority list of projects, dark skies, natural resource and hazard mitigation, along with the Newberry Country Plan. And so you'll be seeing those come to you in the next couple of months, hopefully. Two projects I do want to highlight off our priority list. As you're well aware, our comp plan update is currently at LUBA. And so once we get resolution from LUBA on the appeal of the comp plan, Nicole, who you saw earlier, will come back and she'll have an action plan for the board on how to progress that forward. So we're looking forward to that over the next couple of months. Second thing I want to talk about is the clear and objective. As you know, you just adopted the definitions module for clear and objective. It became effective March 28th. We're currently working on 3 more modules. And again, our goal is to get these to you before July 1st. So you'll be seeing shortly clear and objective module for Title 17, which is our subdivision partition ordinance. You'll be seeing a module for Goal 5. And then another really big one will be our conditional use chapter. So we're going through there and the clear and objective lens for all of the housing related criteria. So you'll be seeing that come before you here in the next couple months. One thing I did want to mention too, and it's a change in planning from what we've done in the past, particularly with text amendments. We've noted a need for us to be much more flexible and adaptable. And so what you've seen over the last year, current planners working on more historically long-range projects, plan amendments, zone changes, and text amendments. To address some staffing issues we had last year, we even brought in some long rangers to work on current planning projects. And so we're taking a bit of a page out of Randy's book and getting our staff cross-trained on multiple disciplines. And so you'll be seeing that in the future. As an outgrowth of that, in addition to having long range and current planning work together, we've also done a much better job recently with our text amendments in bringing the other divisions, building, on-site, and coordinated services into those process and reviews. And as a result, I think what you're seeing with the ADU text amendment from a year and a half ago and the RV rental text amendment, you're going to see a much better product from CDD, because now all of the divisions have been on board. We all know what the reviews and what they're responsible for. And so we've implemented, in addition to that, an internal training program for all of our staff so that we can hit the ground running when the text amendments become effective, which we just did for the definitions module. So out of some of our staffing challenges last year, we recognized the need and we're able to address it. So with the text amendments coming forward to you this year, I think you're going to see much more collaboration among the divisions, and we'll be able to better inform the public and let them know exactly what they should expect when the amendments become effective. So any questions from the board?
Exciting, thank you. Randy.
Thank you, Commissioners. Randy Scheid, County Building Official, and Building Official for the cities of Sisters and La Pine. I just picked a few items off of our work plan to talk about. 2 of them are unique buildings that we have currently going on. One of them is our 3-story medical building in La Pine, which we're nearing the end of trying to get the TIs, the tenant improvements, processed and through for that structure. Our other one is a very unique structure. It's the Air Traffic Control Center at the City of Bend, which we're happy to be a part of. The City of Bend has a strong project management team that we work with on that, as well as the contractor and the airport themselves. That is a building that most people don't see in their careers. It's as noted in the news recently, it will be the tallest building in Central Oregon, and it has some unique workarounds because of the type of building it is. The last item that that's in the work plan that I wanted to talk about is our cross training that Anthony mentioned. With 3,005 square miles of jurisdictional area, we have to be efficient with our certifications and what we can do with 1 vehicle rather than sending out 2 or 3 vehicles to that. So during this winter, we started with your allowance for the position, we hired a new full-time commercial fire and life safety person who will also be doing some field inspections, which is commercial field inspections, which is a great those two back themselves up well when they're going in the field and seeing commercial buildings and they're reviewing them inside. Plus, Krista Appleby, our assistant building official, who's a licensed design professional, is cross-training our 1 and 2 family people to do light commercial work, taking some of the load off of her so she can concentrate on the more complex structures that we have coming in. And this provides them with an opportunity for growth and for career advancement. And it really helps our team gain efficiency. So we're real proud of that. We are, most of the people we hire end up retiring through us. We don't lose many through attrition. And so this is a way to kind of steep them in our culture and keep them and grow up that ladder of complexity in our built environment.
Question about that, like commercial from residential, is that truly just kind of experience in the field, or is there credentials that have to be followed up?
There's definitely, it's called a B3, this is building 3, which is commercial. And so they can, it is a completely different book, different, you know, you look at a lot of things, different travel distances and alarms and sprinklers and everything else. It depends on the occupancy and how complex it is. The more complex the occupancy, the more complex the requirements to mitigate the hazards of that occupancy.
So just being exposed to it, then you got to go down the path with the B3 credentials.
You do, and that certification is merely an allowance to do the work, but you still have oversight of the assistant building official, lead plans examiner at this point, and she's an excellent instructor.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Anything else? Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Angie Havner, Administrative Manager for both Coordinated Services and Code Enforcement. First, I'd like to speak to you about Coordinated Services. During the last few years, we've transitioned, and for those that maybe don't know, Coordinated Services is the permit technicians who coordinate between planning, on-site building, also code enforcement. Just an acknowledgement how business has transitioned over the years to online. So accomplishments that we did last year was just a recognition that the online submittals we wanted to address it and look at education, public communication, just an recognition for professionals for keeping their businesses working, residents, how that impacts their home. And so we looked at it, and one thing that we tackled was our webpage improvement. We worked with Central Oregon Builders Association. They reached out to the professionals and asked where they're struggling. We talked to professionals to see what is the impact, where are they tripping over, how can we improve our communications to them to assist getting their permits out the door. So we did website improvement, and some of the tangible items that we did is we did develop step-by-step online directions. They can go on and see how to apply online. There's tutorials, directions for property research, identifying permit history, and then just navigating the electronic process as a whole. We don't want that to be a hindrance to being able to get permits. We clarified document requirements for all permit types, helping, the goal was to help applicants when they submit with a complete application. We saw lots of people who were submitting, there was a misunderstanding of what a complete application was, and that caused delays, which is time, money, expense out the door. So we worked on that. We improved transparency with communication. We changed some of our language to be understanding, not always for the people who hear this. We took for granted that maybe we were communicating well, but the feedback was there was some misunderstanding with verbiage, language, so we adjusted that. We did directions how to upload documents. Something that seemed so easy was causing hindrances, so we fixed that. How to pay fees online, so professionals had that ability to do these things on applications after working hours, which increased the cost of efficiency for production. We also, what this did was just reduce times for permits to go out the door. It's working well. What we're working on this next year is feedback we got was confusion after we adjusted. That was confusion for inspections. What do we schedule? If they weren't scheduling the right thing, it was causing confusion as what we got feedback from COBA. And so we're working on that. We're going to develop a list of commonly required inspections by project type, put it on our website. Another neat thing that we did on the website was we have live timelines for planning on-site buildings. So people, when they're developing their scope for their project, they can see planning's taking 10 weeks, on-site's taking 6 weeks, and that helps them with their finances. I do want to give a thank you to Jennifer Lawrence, who's our administrative supervisor. She's doing a phenomenal job with this. And then Tim Bergen and Ez Gerland are our application systems analysts, and we could not do this work without them. The feedback has been tremendous from the community, both from professionals and homeowners. So that's what we did in coordinated services. Moving ahead, code enforcement. I'd like to bring in Dan Smith. He's our lead code enforcement specialist. So accomplishments that we did that I would like to speak to, 2 properties we abated this last year. In that abatement, one, just a thank you to solid waste for the contributions for solid waste abatement has been a phenomenal asset to our department. One of the properties we abated was a 30-acre EFU parcel. It had been used as an illegal marijuana grow. It had been in the news
It's
in
really,
years
yes,
past.
you did a great job.
And I just want to note there's 50 dump loads taken to the landfill. That includes greenhouse debris, garbage property, garbage from outbuildings, 1 dump load of scrap metal, 1 recycle load, 3 bio buckets of human waste, 1 hazmat disposal, roughly 50 greenhouses that were present at the start of cleanup. And then it took 2 weeks to abate this property with 4 technicians working each day on it. Cost of abatement for this property was $103,707.55. This property was liened for the cost of abatement. It's currently for sale. And we've been getting calls on it for research weekly. Second property that we abated was 2.59 acres zoned RR10. We removed 21 inoperable vehicles, 20,692 pounds of scrap metal, 42,000 pounds of solid waste, 158 oversized tires, 271 standard tires. Cost of abatement was 5 days with a price tag of $40,903.10. That property was liened, and that lien has since been paid back into our funds. So 2 big accomplishments of cleaning up those 2 properties. In the future, moving forward, I had asked Dan to speak about, as you know, we have some pending code enforcement cases. These are cases that have been submitted but have not been assigned. Typically, those cases had not been put on dial as a warning label. And we discovered that people who were purchasing properties would then buy a property unknowing, and then the new owner would now be responsible for that. So Dan and I got together, brainstormed also with Tim and us again, and created a pending code enforcement notification process that is new. And so I wanted Dan to speak to that. He's been heading it up and working really hard on it. And we've already gotten excellent feedback from the community, both from homeowners and potential buyers, because now what the difference is the pending code enforcement cases now have a warning on dial to let the public know, let the homeowner know that there is a pending code enforcement case. This does 2 things. This allows the homeowner to come into compliance proactively for voluntary compliance before the case gets assigned and they're under the strict timelines for enforcement. And then it also notifies potential buyers that they could be potentially buying something that is not valid use. So just wanted Dan to speak just shortly to it, and then the utilization of our deputy also.
Yeah, so afternoon, Chair and Commissioner, my name is Dan, I'm the lead code enforcement specialist for Deschutes County. Essentially, Angie covered it really well at a high level. Essentially, what we're doing now is when we receive a complaint, or as I'm going through our pending complaints, we're doing a cursory overview of what the violations would be. We're having our sheriff's deputy go out, who we contract with them to have one deputy for us. Kind of do an initial assessment of the property, take photos for us so that we can confirm that, yeah, there's almost certainly a violation happening here. That information, we sending basically a courtesy notice to the property owner that kind of spells out what we are observing as violations, at least initially, and kind of giving them some direction. Our IT department was able to create a website just specifically for this particular project, and highlight some of the issues we're seeing, give a brief description of it, and then they are, hopefully on their own, able to receive the letter, be like, oh, I don't want to be in code enforcement. Go to this website, and it actually walks through some direction on how to resolve the issue before we even assign an investigator to it. So hopefully, we're just starting to get this rolled out, but certainly, as Angie was saying, the community's been very responsive, both from the property owners receiving it, so they can clear it without having any additional documents on their dial webpage, and then for complainants that we're looking at several months of lead time, they're at least getting information now. Hey, we can at least let the property owner know, and hopefully they'll mitigate it on that. So it's been good so far. Great. That's good information.
For context, there's 250 approximate properties that were in that pending status with approximately 570 violations. Just proactive education.
Great. Good update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, for allowing us to put the work plan in a little bit more context. Again, the hearing's on May 7th. We've coordinated with administration to initiate a press release. Obviously, it's working, and we look forward to that morning's opportunity for the public to offer additional remarks, suggestions, and then typically what happens is the board will keep the record open for a period of time and then deliberate and more or less acknowledge the work plan with any revisions, so that it provides the direction starting on July 1st. So appreciate the time and certainly the support from the county commissioners.
I did have one question. So we've got tables 1, 2, and 3 in this staff report. I always am very interested in the things in table 3, but we don't get to many of them, and I'm not sure even the ones that we identify that we'd like you to get to, if there's some capacity, I'm not sure how many of those we get to. So I wanted to ask for the 23-24 work plan and the 24-25 work plan, in table 3, how many things did we get to?
Yeah, probably, easily could count them on one or two fingers. Early this afternoon, Nicole Mardell summarized the text amendment pertaining to medical hardship dwellings.
Right, we did that, we're doing that.
So we got one. The challenge that
Progress.
we're experiencing, I guess it's a benefit of curse, because long range plan is fully deployed. As Anthony Regrini noted, we have plan amendment zone change applications now that are being handled by current planners, which provides some diversity of experience. But we also have some, I'll call them somewhat unfunded mandates. We have House Bill 3197, Anthony touched on that, where there's a series of modules that are requiring our code, for very good reasons, to establish a track for clear and objective standards for housing. And that is an extensive process that takes away from text amendments that we think are important to keep our code modernized. There are other examples. Of course, the board values opportunities as afforded by the legislature, rural accessory dwelling units. That was last year's work program. But coordinating, as Anthony I think mentioned, or we touched on it, a part of Nicole's presentation for medical hardships, is we're going to be bringing back in 2 weeks the RVs as rental dwellings, and it requires the kind of coordination that that Anthony noted, about the cross-training, making sure that we're integrating all of our divisions and providing the information to interested public so they can make informed decisions. So it is a balancing act. There's a lot of interest in many of these text amendments. And it's just a matter of, when we have the time, ensuring that we're coordinating with the board so that your priorities are duly noted so that we can execute them. And I suspect that probably late July, early August, Will Groves, the planning manager, will be checking in with the board because there'll be several projects that will have completed their local review, the comp plan update reconsideration, RV as rental dwellings, clear and objective standards, knock on wood, will be finalized and out of the local decision-making process. So there's some real capacity and opportunities, Commissioner Chang, for you and the other commissioners to determine, okay, we've got this capacity. Do we want to deploy it to dark skies? How soon do we want to initiate Newberry Country Plan update? What about these text amendments, among other noteworthy projects that are noted on the plan? So it's always been a case of tremendous planning projects that warrant attention, and then making sure that we utilize the existing staff we have to the fullest degree. So I appreciate you calling out. It's a bandwidth issue. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. Public hearing, May 7th.
May 7th, yes.
Numbers.
Can we take a 2 minute or 5 minutes?
Sure.
Make sure it's the same.
Yeah, so we've been sitting here a couple hours, so let's take a little bit. That meeting starts at 5:30.
Oh, fun day. Yeah, nice to see you.
So how are you doing?
It's up to executive session after this. Do you have any questions on
I didn't see her. I didn't see her. I guess I didn't see the other ones. Oh. 4 minutes. Well, we're out now. No, there went. I guess the question is,
Are there concerns?
you know, I have them all on especially since I. So I can try to block them out. Yeah. So it's not the mission, it's the structure. When you know, I mean, I hesitate to talk about it.
Yeah, we're excited about it. I think so. I think guys are right. Just got it here. Right now.
Yeah. Any minute now.
Okay. No, it's fine. At least it's not the back of your head,
Yeah,
that's
right.
usually what it is.
Yeah, I want to be out of.
It's one of those
way,
special
too.
places.
Well, that's amazing, that little camera in the middle, it must have.
Yeah, right, it's got such a range.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
it's
God.
really amazing. Who was sitting in front of it? They were like in their heads
Yeah.
in the back, and they were
I've
like,
done that
why didn't
before.
you tell me? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. So they have, we're in Kaiser for the ACT meeting. And so you could order a special lunch, but you know what, I realized what I'm doing? I'm driving over to In-N-Out.
Oh,
I'm
yes, yes, 'cause
like,
you're
why
right
would I
there.
want a special lunch when I could get In-N-Out?
That's funny.
Yeah, I know. Is that crazy?
Yeah, that's good.
I know.
Good.
Like, whoa. I don't know what? It's not that far. 'Cause we're in Kaiser, so.
Anytime we drive over that direction, I have to stop for my son.
You have to go through it, yeah. I drove an hour one time. Yeah, I know. What is it, Grants Pass now, Medford? And Medford does, yeah. And they're putting one in, Twin Falls, Idaho.
I'm hoping that now that they have that things are actually access to and
Yeah.
maybe they'll use it, because they want their products fresh. So I thought, well, maybe it was limited to coming on this side because they didn't want to have to cross the path.
Right.
Winter. So maybe for weather, I don't know, they could short it, so you can actually bring supplies instead of a.
Kim, you were such an optimist.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, my fingers crossed.
Yeah. I know, I went to like the first In-N-Out, where, what is it, my Ontario or something, it was out there. And yeah.
My father-in-law was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so we didn't- that's- Oh, so they're meeting.
Oh, that's good. Now, wait.
Oh, good, we have dinner. At least I'm not gonna eat an apple and peanut butter, that's been my new diet, I love it. The peanut butter is not healthy, no, peanut butter is not healthy, but, no, it's not, but I love apple and peanut butter. Yeah, it's crunchy, yeah, I can eat that for dinner every night. Okay.
I like apples and I like peanut butter jelly sandwich.
But it's like a caramel apple, but it's not quite as dangerous as a caramel, right?
Apple.
Yeah, well, those are hard to find. They do make them, they make them at the one candy store in Sisters, they have the caramel apples there. Or no, the one in Red, okay, yeah, they were really awesome. Thanks.
Oh, she's right there.
I can tell you a team up.
I just did a scan.
Oh. She's here.
Yeah, you're right, you're gonna go back, it's like we're in camp.
We're back to our session now. Thank you. Item number 7, amendment to existing ground lease for the, with the city of Redmond, with floor 2.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Christy Belanger, Deschutes County Property Management. So we're here today to ask the board to approve and sign an amendment to an existing ground lease with the city of Redmond. In essence, what this would do is reduce the number of acres that was leased to the city almost 2 years ago in East Redmond. The lease was for about 12 acres. And this amendment would reduce it to about 3.23, which is representation of where Oasis Village is located. And that would free up this acreage then to be directly leased to Mountain View Community Development for their 75 unit permanent supportive housing project. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause and answer any questions you might have.
So this is just the agreement with the city of Redmond going from 12 to 3.
Correct.
This document.
Yes.
And, okay, we say plus or minus 3.23. Do we know exactly? I mean, is there any kind of an issue there? Are we
No
okay?
issue. No
Okay.
issue, yeah.
Great, thanks, thank you.
So is there a motion?
Yes, can I make the motion then to move approval of a document number 2025-060, a First Amendment to a ground lease with the city of Redmond to modify the original acreage from plus or minus 12 acres to 3.23 acres, plus or minus 3.23 acres, located on a county-owned property known as map and tax lot 1513000000103 in East Redmond.
Second. Any other discussion? Calling for the vote, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang? Yes. And I'll vote no. I would like to see the city of Redmond be able to take this whole project and go forward, but there we go. Item number 8, ground lease of Mountain View Community Development for use of 9.4 acres.
All right, this is also a property management item. We'll go ahead and have Michelle and Rick introduce themselves.
Michelle Cross, I work with Mountain View Community Development on the subject property.
Rick Russell, Executive Director at Mountain View Community Development.
All right, so sort of on the tails of our last agenda item, this is to ask the board to proceed with the approval and signing a new 65-year ground lease with Mountain View Community Development for the use of plus minus 9.4 acres in East Redmond plus a 50-foot buffer. And this would allow for a 75-unit permanent supportive housing project. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share. Figure this out here. Here we go.
I have 47 slides. It should take me about 90 minutes to get through. I'm sure you're fine with that, right?
Show it to us.
Well, we've already gotten like 95 emails regarding the project, so go ahead. We'd love to hear
Wasn't
it.
even trying to do that.
I know,
It's
I know you
popular.
weren't.
Permanent supportive housing, significant need in our community. That slide's great. The first units to come online are just within the last 12 months. Warm Springs built 10 units. Cleveland Commons just getting their last residents in right now, 34 units. What we're proposing is in the same vein, in a cottage style of 75 units. In previous versions, you might have heard me say 60 units. That has increased. As we worked with the city of Redmond, they determined that we were not meeting the minimum density for the amount of acreage that we have there. I would say there's some topography issues with rocks and things like that. It's not all exactly usable, but we're glad to increase the number to 75. Go to the next slide. And I know you know this project well. Even go to the next slide. But we are talking about approximately 9.5 acres next to Oasis Village on the east side of Redmond. Go to the next slide. So again, cottage style. These are individual cottage style homes. We will be working with Hayden Homes on this. I'm very glad to have that relationship. Go to the next slide. There will be 2 floor plans, a 400 square foot floor plan and a 600 square foot floor plan. That would be 1 bedrooms, and most of them, 2/3 of them will be 1 bedroom units, and the other 1/3 will be 2 bedroom units. This is an existing floor plan that Hayden Homes builds. Go to the next slide. I'll skip through this fairly quickly, but some initial engineered drawings by Hayes McCoy of what this project will look like. If you look closely at the topography lines, you'll see how we're sort of building around the terrain and trying to really essentially build a community, a neighborhood there. Next slide, please, Christine. Multiple partners here, Housing Works providing technical support, property management support, Hidden Homes on design, multiple architects involved in this, both in the initial concepts as well as there will be a community building at the center of this neighborhood where there will be case management offices and event space, gathering space for people who live part of this community. Next slide. In light of time, I'm going to skip even to the next slide.
But I have a question about that one.
Yeah, okay, yes, please.
It says 10% of the homes reserved for non-previously unhoused households.
Yes.
So they could go directly from like out here to one of these, 10% of them?
So
7.5?
those 10% are reserved for a specific reason. We're looking for people who would like to live and be a part of this community and be a neighbor in this community, be a presence of peace amongst a community of people who've lived difficult, hard lives. We saw this modeled well in Austin, Texas. We think they built a good concept there. And when someone is having maybe a mental health episode, maybe a relapse, you've got a few neighbors there who are on site who probably led relatively stable, healthy lives, who are there as just a presence of peace in the neighborhood. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. And you know, I did recommend if you could bring in some veterans too.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of veterans in our community.
We do. We haven't singled out the units specifically for veterans, but I think that's something we can take a look at. We certainly serve veterans in our existing program as it is.
I know you do. I just, you know, I just was like, okay.
Yeah, I think we will take a look at that. Next slide. This.
Yes, the part of the permanent supportive housing kind of criteria is that the residents of this community are chronically unhoused individuals. It's interesting when we look at other projects who have similar kind of ethos, Community First in Austin, the majority of those residents were an older population. They are people who, you know, their average age upon arrival was 56 and their average age of life was 58. They've lived very hard lives by the time they get to this community. These are for rent apartments or homes, so residents are paying a portion of their income and the remainder is subsidized. There are on-site services available for residents, support services such as case management, but we also are looking into bringing additional services on site. Maybe that's a Mosaic Medical or whatever kind of services these residents need. This is permanent housing, so this is not a transitional development. This is a place for people to come and live and stay.
Next slide. Do you want to speak to the federal home bank? Do you want to speak to OHCS?
Sure. So we are seeking Oregon Housing Community Services financing for this project. It's a great pipeline for not just capital construction financing, but also for the ongoing operating expenses associated with running this community. So we have recently been accepted into the OHCS's Permanent Supportive Housing Institute, and the great part of being part of the institute is that upon completion, funds are then earmarked for or set aside for our project. So we will complete that institute in the fall. We will also be through our OHCS ORCA, the application where we apply for funds. So we'll be done with that hopefully early summer, and then the institute will conclude in the fall.
This request does come with some urgency. We are applying for a $3 million grant from the federal home loan bank that's due May 1st. And in order for us to submit that grant, we have to have an executed lease of the property that we can build on. And so Board of County Commissioners discussed this late last fall. We've been working with property management on the lease language back and forth, and we've got multiple revisions, but we have now arrived at a version that everybody is nodding their heads in agreement to. And so that's why it's come before you right now. We're hoping your heads are nodding in agreement to this as well. So that $3 million grant will posted by May 1. We will find out if we are awarded. in mid-December. However, the folks who are writing it for us have written this grant many times. It is a fairly objective scoring system. And they're telling us we are hitting all the criteria points that we would score above what where the previous
68
cut line
points.
has been.
Yeah.
Estimated timeline. We guarantee that this will be built exactly on this timeline or your money back. We are in the pipeline for the funding now. If this all goes as planned, fall, winter, and we have the funding is there and approved by the legislature for PSH, there should be funding there to begin infrastructure even this winter. And by this time next year, we should see things being vertical. Again, Lord willing, the creek don't rise, and the legislature does what they need to do as well. And so this is an innovative project, the first of its kind for Redmond, and a much needed resource. You all know that we see parking, we see unhoused people kind of get into the pipeline and want to move toward housing, but they get stuck and there's a bottleneck because there just aren't enough available units. And so they end up taking up, say, parking spaces that we could make available to others if we could move them on to the right type of housing. And this is the right type of housing for, in particular, our older, unhoused folks who are living largely on disability of $750 to maybe $1,100 per month. And with that, I would take your questions.
What if 3 to 5 years from now it hasn't proceeded? What's the scenario with the backup?
Yeah, I'm gonna look at Christie and remind me there's some language in the lease that speaks to that.
Yeah, the lease could be terminated if they weren't to execute. They have the option to terminate it. So if they're like, we can't get this off the ground, then we, yeah, it could be terminated.
Just, yeah, so it's not a whole lot of overhead, hopefully. That's my thought. And then utilities, it's nice to know that there's construction dollars and recurring operation dollars. Who's paying for utilities?
Yeah, so as of right now, the city has said, they're building the 21st Street, which will have utilities pulled. They're pulling utilities for the managed camp area. We intend to pull utilities from 21st Street to our project, and we will be paying for the cost associated with that.
And then utilities for an individual unit, heating and cooling and water?
Oh, as in like
Well,
rent,
just
yes,
both,
yes, sorry. Yeah, that is all, these are for rent, like you and I would go rent an apartment out in town where residents are responsible for the costs associated with that. And there are ways to subsidize those expenses and get help if needed, but there is a lot of autonomy in this living situation. We want people to have some skin.
So you're saying then that they will pay a rent and then they'll pay utilities on top of that?
Yeah, I believe in
Unless
the,
there's
I believe in the PSH, the state's funding model for this is trying to get the participant to pay 30% of their income toward their cost, their rent and their utilities. And the state agrees to subsidize the remainder of that. So the state's providing support in 3 ways. They're providing the capital to build it, the ongoing operations for staff, for case management staff, and a subsidy for the renter. And they make that commitment for 15 years. So I would emphasize that the county's bringing land to this project, but we're going about finding the funding to build it and to operate it from outside of the county. So we're able to bring a lot of resources into Deschutes County that wouldn't come here otherwise.
Is this how the 10 units in Warm Springs were done then?
I'm not clear on that. The tribes have their own channels with OHCS that are different than the PSH channel that we're in, so I'm not clear on that.
Also have access to certain federal funds that other people don't have access to, so. I don't have any other questions. I mean, we've been reviewing this draft lease for quite a while now, and what's come to us in executive session at least once. So I'm pretty comfortable with where it's at this point.
I hope there's nothing new here. This is, but we are at the finish line of a lease and we're very excited about that.
The motion.
Okay, fine. Move approval of document number 2025-058, a 65-year ground lease with Mountain View Community Development for the use of 9.48 acres of county-owned property in East Redmond for the development of permanent supportive housing.
Second.
Any other discussion? So just to reference, there's been a courtyard cottage cluster request by private property owners for many years, and the state land use system can't seem to get to that concept. So it's nice that government can do it, but it's just a shame that private property owners don't have some of these opportunities. So we will go from there. Any other discussion?
City of Bend has a cottage cluster code. Allowed to do cottage clusters. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
NUA 10 outside of cities.
And you know what I said already, that it, please make it so that when people live there, they're proud, that's their home, and they need to take care of it. And I think it's really excellent that 30% of your income is put into being there, because I think that's making it possibly a more successful operation in the long term.
So calling for the vote, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And Chair Lombardo. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, other items, and we do have executive session. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Commissioners. The one timely topic, since we do not have a full board on Wednesday and we have a joint meeting with the City of Bend next Monday, is the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, COIC appointment. As you said, Commissioners conducted interviews on Friday of the candidates. We have not discussed whom you might be interested in appointing. It's hopeful if you're prepared to identify a candidate, proceed with an appointment next Wednesday on April 30th.
So just give my information to Brett. I don't know if we wanna, you wanna share any thoughts or see if we're on the same page?
Oh, you have had a chance to look at, Brett has not had a chance to look at all three. So it's up to you if you want to
So she
identify
could
those.
just
on
do
that,
it
but- right,
quick
or we-
sheet,
yeah,
because I gave her my answer. Okay.
Sure. Okay,
Great.
Yeah, so just communicate with Brett if we're on the same page.
okay, thank you.
Okay. I was able to attend the Oregon Prepared Conference last week on Thursday. End of Wednesday and Thursday. Did a presentation on the Core 3 project. And there's emergency managers from around the state, so it was a real good event for that domain. Worked out real well. I want to thank COIC for their support. Shelby Knight was there with us also. Last Tuesday morning was Project Wildfire, so I was here for that also. That worked out real well. Just fire-free days, the community fire preparedness events going on around the county. Time to do that cleanup. So yeah, any other?
I'll report back. I attended the fan lunch on Friday last week. And we also had a Redmond Airport Committee meeting on Thursday.
It's where the ready lunch since last week.
Right, we
All
had the ready
attended that,
lunch,
yeah.
I had a sisters meeting, yeah, no, I like going. Then I had meetings with a lot of people coming to my office, and then with Brad Porterfield, and then I had lunch with Carol Stiles. So, yes.
Okay, yeah, so just some updates. So at this time,
Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660, subsection 2E and H, which allows the board to meet in order to discuss real property negotiations and litigation. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made, and at the conclusion, we will open the doors and invite the audience back.
So,